Current or former missing persons, what is your story? When I was young, probably about 6 I think, my family went on vacation to Yosemite. We stayed in a small cabin at a campground. I met another kid who was a bit older than me and we went exploring. Apparently, we went a bit too far and eventually ran into a bear cub. We just stood and stared at each other for a few minutes and went our separate ways. When I got back to the cabin, I found out that the park rangers had been looking out for me because my parents had no idea where I was. For some reason, they didn't think my bear story was as cool as I did. My sister once had the entire neighborhood, the police department, and God knows who else out looking for her. It turns out she had crawled behind the sofa and fallen asleep on top of an air conditioning vent for about 5 hours. My mum went inside as the sun started to go down and sat down on the couch to cry. My sister then crawled out from behind the couch and started petting her on the head and asking her what was wrong. I got tired of my dad's constant drunken bullcrap, so I ran away at 15. KSP found me less than a week later, drunk as F in a train yard by where I lived. Dad was pretty upset, but he got sober and stopped being a jerk after that. We made amends before he passed. Had a great relationship after he got sober. He had spent 22 years in the Navy and was bitter and angry after him and my mum got divorced. I don't and didn't hate him for that. It was just a letdown at the time because I idolized the man, only to see him come apart and take it out on me. Not really missing, but my parents flipped and filed a missing person report when they couldn't find me. I was left at Walmart by them, and the only reason they found me was because they retraced their steps, and Walmart was paging them every 5 minutes. You'd be surprised. I used to work at IKEA. People would forget a lot of things and people there. The saddest thing is that they weren't always forgetting. I remember a case where a little child was dropped off at the kids area, maximum 1 hour time allowed, and they were still there after 3 hours. A search was conducted of the entire store, but the parents were nowhere to be found. They eventually showed up in the early evening. Turns out they went to the seaside for a day and just didn't want to take their kid with them. It was never reported, but my dad once forgot me at a cafe in the mid-90s during a time when the local police were looking for an awful Belgian man called Mark de Trouw. Because everyone was paranoid about their kids at the time, my mum had made me learn my full name, my address, our phone number, and my parents' work phone numbers by heart, so when people realized that I was alone, they were able to call my mum at work. Shortly after, my dad showed up absolutely horrified. He had forgotten that he'd taken me with him. Make your kids learn your phone number by heart. Man, I thought the days of memorizing phone numbers were long since past, but of course this is actually a very good thing to do, isn't it? If we could all learn every single one of our friends' numbers in the 90s and noughties, these kids can learn one mobile phone number. It's a really good way to resolve those little instances where they wander off, or we accidentally leave them in the adult movie store or something. Not me, but my brother was missing for about a year. He had disappeared before, but only for a few days at that time. He suffers from paranoid schizophrenia and would often get delusional. But this time, he just didn't turn up. We lived in New York City and my parents had no idea where to look for him. They'd regularly go to the police station and have a look at bodies that had turned up. He didn't have any friends or girlfriends we could ask about him. He had just vanished. A year later, we got a call from a hospital in DC. My brother had been picked up on the street, nearly dead from malnutrition. He'd gone to Washington to warn the government about something or other, he'd refused to eat, believing his food was poison, and lived on the streets for a year. The only reason he'd survived was because other homeless people took care of him and convinced him to occasionally eat something. He was a skeleton when they found him, full of flea bites. Eventually, my parents nursed him back to health. He's still mentally ill, but hasn't tried to disappear again. I think about him whenever I see a homeless person. I was whisked away by my biological mother and officially missing for 3 months when I was a year old. My bio mother had a horrendous crystal habit and took me during a court-mandated visitation and kept me in her various users' and sellers' houses. When I was found, I hadn't been changed for days. I was in damp clothing and I'd been given cough syrup daily to keep quiet. She was arrested and eventually released. My grandmother reported me missing. It was the only unsupervised visitation because there was a family emergency where my cousin had to go to the hospital and my grandmother was too ill to supervise, but she was at home in bed. She realized my mother hadn't come home with me and that's when the panic set in. She always blamed herself. Unfortunately, in situations like that, it's always the people who aren't to blame that feel at fault. It was my first day in kindergarten. I was supposed to go to the after-school daycare, but I lost the note saying I was supposed to. So the teacher shoved me on the bus and told the bus driver where I lived. Not sure if that's actually how it went down, but regardless, they made me leave. So the bus drops little 5-year-old me off at home. All the doors are locked, and my mother wouldn't even get out of work for another 2 to 3 hours. So I do what any little kid does. I sit on my front porch and I cry. Luckily, I lived right across the street from the high school, and this angel of a woman sees me from the bleachers while a soccer game was going on. She comes over to check on me and stays with me the entire time. Meanwhile, at the school, the staff is going crazy because I'm nowhere to be found. My mother was called and, as I'm told, crying profusely. Then, out of the blue, I see this 1960s brown Cadillac pull up, and over walks my principal. He thanks the woman for taking care of me and brings me back to the school. Because of my situation, they suspended my teacher and the bus driver, and I never do anything without proper paperwork. Just talked to my mother, and apparently the teacher left because of major medical issues at the time. I got lost at Six Flags as a kid, and it seemed like the entire police force was looking for me. My mother was on the phone with the police after I fell asleep at a cemetery for 7 hours after school. I had a terrible home life, so I'd be anywhere and everywhere I could be to not go home. Beginning of the school year was still really nice outside, so I decided to hit up the Dunkin' Donuts near my house. I grabbed some coffee and I walked into the cemetery that was maybe 10 minutes walk from my house. There was a really nice mausoleum in the cemetery, which happened to be the structure at the highest point in the city, so you can, on a clear day, see about 15 miles. I chilled there for a while, just kind of thinking. About 300 feet away is a statue of Jesus on the cross with other figures. I was kind of tired, so I laid a little ways away from it, just enough to get some shade, not enough to be lying on it, and I listened to music until I passed out. I woke up a few hours later, figured, screw it, might as well go home, and my mother started losing her crap. He just walked in. I'm sorry. Where the F were you? So I left and went back to the cemetery. I was reported missing for a few days because I ran away from home at 16. I ran away with my 17-year-old boyfriend, who was not reported missing by his parents. My parents read through some of my chat messages. I had a habit of saving my logs, and they knew I was most likely heading north or west, but they weren't sure. Thankfully, since I was listed as missing and they knew who I was with, the guy was being monitored and he used his debit card on the way, so they had an idea of where I'd be. The cops came with a search warrant to the place we were staying a couple of hours before we were going to head off west. We already had a new car ready to go, with some cash, to make it harder to be tracked. We were going to leave later that night. In retrospect, I'm very lucky. If we'd taken off before the cops had found me, there's a more than decent chance I'd have stayed missing, and life would have been very, very bad. I married the guy a couple of months later, and he was an absolutely horrible person. His manipulations and isolation of me were a massive factor in that running away the first time. I had a decent stay at a sheep farm while I was a ward of the state, though, waiting for my parents to arrive and get me. So that was neat. After a long period of estrangement, I went to visit my mother and father. This was after a long drive and I was quite tired. My mother decided it was the perfect opportunity to berate me. I tried to leave and she blocked my car physically so she could continue to berate me. I just left my car in the driveway and walked to a nearby hotel. I stayed there for a couple of days, went back and got my hotel without seeing them, and drove back home. A few years later, I Googled myself as I was up for a job and wanted to make sure there wasn't anything stupid on the internet about me. I found out they'd reported me missing. I called the government and got it removed. I do not recall which government agency I contacted. It was either a sheriff's department or a local police department website, which publicly displayed my photo and my mother's nonsense. And yes, you're right, it does sound weird that I called the government. Considering the extent these events upset me, it makes me happy to laugh about it now. Good on you for asserting your legal adulthood and autonomy in their faces, and just defying them on both those things without violence or getting your hands any more dirty than you had to. They clearly didn't understand that they'd mistreated you in any way, and were incapable of respecting your independence. You gave them a shot, and they failed. You can hold your head high after that. I've been missing for about 5 years now. It really gives you a new perspective on how many missing people, particularly adults, either just don't want to be found or simply haven't contacted the particular people who filed the report. The people who know where I am and what happened are the people I want to know that information. For a while, I was homeless and met several others who were also in the database or on the Charlie Project. Circumstances take you to places you never thought you'd go. It's not always as simple as being snatched off the street. And the ones who reported me didn't get anywhere by doing so. My trail went to a website of 150,000 plus other missing adults and just hangs out there perpetually cold. I'm fine with that. I have really strict parents, and they absolutely did not want me to have a boyfriend. Instead of doing what they wanted, I went and got a boyfriend behind their backs and would routinely sneak out to hang with him. One night he dropped me off at home and my mum saw us kiss. She flipped out and started smacking the heck out of me and threatened to kill me. So, when everyone went to sleep, I packed all of my stuff in the middle of the night and left. I walked to my boyfriend's house, clear on the other side of town, and stayed with him. Woke up to multiple threats from my parents about how they were going to charge him with kidnapping or with being some sort of prevert. He was 20 at the time. I stayed there until they filed a missing persons report and the police came and took me home. I ended up dating him for 2 years anyway. Haha. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was 9 and sometimes I'd walk home after school. Sometimes my mum would come pick me up. One day I was invited to go to my friend's house down the block to work on a school project, and I called home from the school phone to see if that was okay. The line was busy, so I kept calling for nearly half an hour and couldn't get through. I started walking towards my friend's house on the same route I'd normally walk home, hoping my mum would pass me. I was also thinking maybe I'd mixed up the days because my mum hadn't come to get me. I told the office workers I was going to walk to my friend's house and to let my mum know I'd been calling since school got out. It took me about 15 minutes to walk to my friends, and then I started calling my mum again. For the next hour, the line kept going to a busy signal. I was getting really worried by that point, so I left, and on the way home a family friend saw me and said my mum had reported that I was missing. In the 15 minutes it had taken me to get to my friend's house, she had finally got off the phone with whoever she was talking to, driven to the school, hadn't seen me, waited a few minutes, then drove home and started calling the cops, my dad, and anyone else she could think of to help look for me. It never occurred to her to ask any of the school staff if they'd seen me, or to get off the phone for a few minutes in case I or anybody else was trying to call. The police even scolded her for tying up the line after they told her to keep it clear. I was missing for about 2 days. My family didn't notice, but the school did. I was 300 miles away drinking my life away at the beach toe. Went there on a Sunday morning and told my dad I was going to stay with my friend this week. I got on a train and rode for about 3 hours and rented a hotel for those 2 nights. Got drunk every day and made some friends. When I got back to school on Wednesday, people were so happy that I was alive. It was only 2 days. Someone started a rumor that I was kidnapped. When I was 7 years old, everyone in my family got the flu pretty bad. My 2 younger sisters and I all shared a room adjacent to my parents', and my baby brother was sleeping in my parents' bed. Well, because of the illness, my 2 younger sisters were also sleeping in my parents' bed. At around 1:30 in the morning, I woke up and realized I was the only person sleeping in my room. Not wanting to be alone, I crawled into my parents' room and saw everyone cuddled on the bed. Feeling incredibly jealous, I turned to go back to my room, but had a light bulb moment and figured out another solution. I bundled down to the bottom of the covers at the foot of the bed, completely covered. Around 2:15 a.m., my mum woke up to check on me, as mothers do sometimes, and I wasn't there. Unusual. She checks for me in her bed. Husband and 3 visible children. She goes downstairs and checks to see if I'm sleeping on the sofa or in one of the 2 guest bedrooms. We have one door in our house that's tricky and will sometimes swing open of its own accord. That door was open. She checks both bathrooms and there's still no sign. At around 2:30 she woke up my father. It was early February and therefore quite cold out. My parents walked around outside and they saw my footprints all around the house. However, I'd been outside earlier that day and it hadn't snowed in a few weeks. My parents were afraid I'd become delirious and wandered outside in the cold or worse. So after some heated discussion, they first called the cops, and then our babysitters to watch the rest of the kids. In about 10 minutes, the entire police force of our tiny town was in our living room. They'd lit up all 16 acres of our property with floodlights, and have lifted up a chopper in the county over to start a search. All of my siblings were woken up and moved to the living room with the babysitter. Funnily enough, this is actually the youngest sister's earliest memory. The chief of police said they were going to crack search the house and started in my parents' bedroom. Naturally, the first thing they did was take the covers off the bed. The only thing I remember is being woken up by a police officer shining the light in my face and rudely ripping the covers off me. I was incredibly annoyed. Naturally, my parents were incredibly apologetic, but the officers were very good-natured and said not to worry about it, and that this was definitely the preferred outcome. About 5 months later, my father and I went to the local fire hall's annual fundraiser and performed a few songs that my dad had me learn specifically for this occasion. And he told the story of what happened to me that night, thanking the first responders for their quick action and good attitude. I think we donated some money, but honestly, I have no idea. I was pretty embarrassed because everyone was picking on me, but flattered enough by the fact that I got to sing for all of the adults that I didn't mind. That's probably the fastest way I've spent your hard-earned tax dollars. You're welcome. Not that interesting, but I was 14 and decided to walk to my then-boyfriend's house, which was an hour away walking, but I thought I could do it since it was still in the same city. Anyway, I sneak out the front door while everyone's asleep, and I almost got kidnapped. Some guy pulled up in his car on the side of the street where I was walking. There was no sidewalk, so I was in the shoulder and I made the ugliest double chin face I could make and picked up a rock to try and make myself look super ugly so I wouldn't get kidnapped. And I just stood there with my double chins until he finally drove off. I kept walking. It's maybe 25 minutes later and I've now found myself passing nightclubs and so many people outside drunk and in short revealing clothes. That's when I got scared and went up to 2 policemen I saw on the corner. I told them I needed a ride home, and they asked for my info. I gave them my address and name. They looked me up on their computer and found out there was a missing person report out on me. When they dropped me off in front of my door, my mum was up, my sister, my aunt and uncle and cousins were all there. It was the most embarrassing moment of my life, and I never snuck out again. I mean, regardless of whether that person actually wanted to kidnap you, I feel like that's the sort of experience that scares someone off future such acts of rebellion on your part. He might have also thought you were a crazy person with those faces. At 14, I would have thought you'd just run or jump fences or something. I had a manic episode and went on a spontaneous trip and blocked everyone's numbers. Don't ask me why, I was manic. I now know that I have bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and I've gotten help. So this is kind of a wild story. I was pretty young when it all happened, so I know this from hearing it from family members. My grandmother lives 6 hours or something away, like that from my family. Growing up, she'd rarely come to visit us at our house. Instead, my parents, brother and I would go to our cabin in the mountains and meet her there, as it was a midpoint between both our houses. Now, my grandma went a little bit crazy after her husband died, a few years before I was born. Around this time, it was becoming more and more obvious that there was something just a little off with her. She had some very strange beliefs and started to become a bit forgetful. One day, we were all at the cabin. I was around 4 and my brother was around 5 at the time. That day, I guess my dad decided to go fishing without us all. My grandma was watching my brother and I, and my mum decided to take a nap. She woke up and the cabin was empty. There was no sign of my brother, grandma, or me. My dad got back shortly after, and he hadn't heard anything from my grandmother either. So my parents had no clue where we were. I'm not sure how much time passed, but my parents were obviously freaking out. I think they phoned the police and were getting ready to make the missing persons report when an unfamiliar vehicle pulled into the driveway. Out pops me, my brother, and my grandmother, and some random guy. Basically, what had happened was my grandmother decided to take my brother and I for a walk in the woods without saying anything to my parents. Her being the forgetful old woman she is, she got lost. Eventually, she found the highway and thought it would be safe for her, a frail 80-year-old woman, and 2 young children to hitchhike on a highway in the middle of the mountains, basically no man's land minus a ski resort here and there. We were just lucky that the guy who found us was super nice. A few times, actually. The most interesting one is that my mum took me to my grandfather's house while I was sleeping. I was very small, maybe 4. I woke up alone, the house was dark and nobody was answering. According to the Pluto cartoon I watched that morning, I was kidnapped. I broke out and started wandering the streets barefoot in my nightgown in the opposite direction of our house. Some sweet old ladies wrapped me up in a blanket and called the cops. Eventually, through good small-town police work, he figured out who I belonged to because I only knew my nickname and not my address. I got kidnapped by my mother, who currently wasn't allowed near me. Luckily, I got found that night. Unluckily, however, I spent the next week having to wake up in a different foster home every day. That was a truly terrifying experience and one that stuck with me my whole life. I, at hardly 1 year old, was 10 minutes away from having an Amber Alert on me when I was kidnapped by my grandparents. They were babysitting me and kept me for 2 days, nowhere to be found. Then, right before the alert came out, they filed for emergency custody and won the case. They then raised me very poorly for 8 years until I could live with my mum. Not me, but when I was in middle school, there was an episode of Seventh Heaven where pictures of missing children were scrolled through at the end of the show, and one of them was of a girl who rode on my school bus. Apparently her parents were divorced, or well on their way there, and her dad took her and absconded from her home state. I remember how eerie it felt to actually recognize one of the missing children posters and photos. Yes, there were a lot of phone calls to the hotline number provided, and to the local police department from parents of the kid that recognized her. When she got on the bus the next day, she wasn't pleased. In hindsight, I don't think she knew she was missing. I really think she was under the impression that it was okay to be with her dad. She moved again shortly thereafter, I assume back to her mum's. I think of her often, and sometimes I wonder if that same episode still has the posters at the end. How many cases have been solved and kids found? How did you play the Uno reverse card on someone who attacked your character? As a lifeguard, we had a rule that very young kids needed an adult in the water within arm's reach in the main pool. I saw this mum and her 5-year-old walk in. The mum is wearing jeans and on her phone, clearly not planning on swimming. I anticipate the issue and go to talk to her before the kid gets in. I explain our policy, that the pool is 4 feet deep minimum and that the policy is for the safety of the child, that having a parent close by who can respond in case of drowning immediately is by far faster than relying on the lifeguard to get down, jump in, and swim all the way out for a rescue. She says it's a stupid policy, that her kid is a fantastic natural swimmer and that they take him to the lake and he swims just fine. That I'm accusing her of being a bad parent, that I just don't want to do my job, all of the classic offended parent BS. Literally while she's telling me this, the kid runs and jumps into the pool, dog paddles about 10 feet out away from the edge, then goes into active drowning mode, requiring a rescue from the other lifeguard, who thankfully was basically already there to catch the kid. She signed the refusal of care and left quicker than anyone I've ever seen. Felt bad for the kid. She seemed almost mad at him for making her look like an idiot. I started working on the production line of an auto parts manufacturer. I was hot pressing rivets into the base of an emergency brake base. According to production logs, a day's run was 300 pieces. Acceptable errors were 3. I worked there for 2 weeks before the line supervisor advised my managing consultant that I was not meeting production requirements. According to my logs, I had 0 errors and exceeded my 300 quota every day. Another line supervisor confided in me that I was being replaced with my supervisor's cousin, just arrived from the Philippines. I didn't argue or protest, it would have done me no good. The managing consultants knew as well but had no pull. After re-examining my resume and seeing I had a degree in computer science and certification in technical manual writing, I was brought back to the very same production floor in a different role. As a part of QA compliance, every workstation needed the production one-offs documented with illustrated inspection reference guides. When I arrived at the office, my former line supervisor demonstrated the quadruple take. Patrick Stewart had nothing on her. No one told her what my role was. My presence there resembled that of a site inspector. I walked the entire floor borrowing templates, taking measurements, and photos. It looked very official. My former line supervisor thought that I was on her production line as a ringer to inspect her. She worked every day worried that I was preparing to give her the axe. She shared that concern in confidence with others who knew better. Nobody corrected her, they just told her not to worry. Well, either you're a much better person than most of us, or the sweet, sweet smell of her fear was enough to sustain your need for revenge. Honestly, working for someone you were convinced was going to try and fire you for years on end would probably be disastrous for your mental health. I'd be searching jobs during office hours. That's some sweet revenge for you. I was a service desk technician at a hospital helping a doctor reset his password. He kept misspelling his temporary password. It was welcome12345. Turns out he thought welcome has 2 L's and freaked out at me citing his education and my, at the time, lack thereof as evidence that he was right. After going back and forth, he got frustrated and handed me off to his nurse and left. She got it on the first try and then apologized to me for her boss's behavior. The funnest part was that as she was hanging up, I heard her talking to another nurse saying, "Yep, Dr. Dumb Idiot couldn't spell welcome again." I film and edit promotional videos. Then I post them on my company's YouTube channel. The day after I uploaded a particular run-of-the-mill video, my manager called me into his office because one of our D-bag directors, who hates our department and loves undermining me in particular, sent an email to my manager and a few higher-ups. In the email, he stated that I'd messed up the promo video because there were all of these other disgusting videos attached to it. As proof, he included a screenshot of the end of the video where all of the recommended videos appeared to star scantily clad Asian women in suggestive poses. Neither he nor my manager knew how YouTube algorithms worked, that the videos were suggested because he or someone on his account viewed that kind of content before. I have no idea how my manager explained this to him. I had a boss who thought everyone else was an idiot. One morning, the computer in the office wasn't working. She asks me if I knew anything about computers, and I tell her that I've used one before. She tells me to check the computer in the office and see if I can figure out why it's stopped working. I press the power button and she calls me a moron, telling me that she's already tried that herself. I get under the desk for a moment and then come back up. I tell her to press the power button again and it comes right on. She asks me what was wrong with it and I tell her that it was unplugged. Our school's schedule got revamped, which meant that one of our classes that was 2 periods long was cut in half to accommodate all of the changes. When I brought this up to the teacher I was co-teaching with, she called me an idiot and told everyone sitting in our table group that I wasn't very good at math, and everyone laughed at me. A few minutes later, the principal cleared up the new schedule, only for her to realize that she was wrong in the first place. Felt so good to see the look on her face when she realized she was the idiot and not me. Guy tried to tell me he knew more of my job than I did because he went to school to be an engineer and that I just sell the machines. I emailed him info directly from the manufacturer on why he was wrong. He's not my client anymore. I don't care. Screw him and anyone who uses education as a reason to be a jerk. Had a friend in college who was very full of himself. One morning while eating breakfast in the cafeteria, someone said, "I wonder how bagels are made." I said, "I'm pretty sure bagels are boiled and then baked." The pompous friend then said, "Are you stupid? Bagels aren't boiled, that's ridiculous." Someone did a quick Google search to find that bagels are in fact boiled for a minute or two before baking. People seemed genuinely intrigued by this information. When I was in 8th grade, we'd just learned about the seasons and Earth's rotation and all that. To my surprise, my teacher taught us that the Earth is actually closest to the sun during winter in our country, but it's cold because of the tilt on the axis, not because of the proximity to the sun. The tilt determines the seasons. And then soon after that, I went to math class and my teacher said something about how it was freezing because we're so far from the sun. And of course I piped up to tell him he was wrong, according to what Mr. Science teacher had just taught us. My math teacher went off, ripping into me so hard in front of the class. I should mention it was lighthearted. He was known for being funny and making fun of kids all the time. Him and I were going back and forth for a while, and I specifically remember him saying, "Oh yeah, because when I'm cold I move away from the fire. Yeah, that makes perfect sense." And I kept arguing, "No, it's because of the Earth's tilt." And so finally he Googled it, and I was right. He at least gave me credit and admitted that he was in the wrong after that. A Dutch couple visited my workplace. It was a tourist visitor center. They insisted that the French translation on our map was wrong. The reasoning was that Groenland shouldn't be there because it was the Dutch word for Greenland, not the French one. I told them that Groenland was also the French translation, to which they chided back, "And how would you know?" "I'm bilingual. I speak French," I informed them. "Clearly not very well," they insisted, and then proceeded to ask for the Wi-Fi so they could use Google Translate. Well, I gave them the Wi-Fi, and to Google Translate they went. Sure enough, Groenland. They didn't even apologize. They just said, "I guess the map is correct then," and then left. Jerks. A tour group had a dad in it who insisted on trying to give us 2 cents on my animals and proceeded to put his fingers in the tank with our stunted gators, despite my warning and practically yelling at him not to. The whole time he was saying how hatchlings couldn't hurt a human only for the male to shoot out of his favorite hiding spot and latch onto the guy's hand. Yeah, I had to bite my tongue to stop laughing. This guy feels like the kind of person who gives a 3-minute diatribe every time a guide, teacher, or other official asks a group any questions. And as someone who dies inside every time one of those people opens their mouths, thank you, little alligator. I lived in Germany for a year after high school as part of an exchange program, and there were several times where I had to make phone calls. I had to call doctors, employers, program coordinators and stuff, so I got fairly used to the whole telephone garb in German. I could speak pretty fluently on the phone, but since it's not my native language, I would of course make small grammatical errors and stuff like that. This led to the unfortunate situation where people would assume I was German when on the phone because I spoke well enough, but since I kept making mistakes, they'd also think I was stupid. People were quite rude to me over the phone, assuming that was due to the assumed stupidity. After revealing I was actually a foreigner, they always sounded so surprised and complimentary of my German and were much more helpful and polite afterwards. At work one day, writing a menu board for lunch specials, a couple came in and started chuckling behind me. This lady gives me the snide look and says, "What's a sandwich? It's spelt sandwich, honey." She wrote sand, like in the desert. I just smiled and didn't even correct her. That cocky stupidity was truly a sight to behold. I'm an application developer in the public sector. I've made many of the computer programs where I work, such as the human resources, incident reporting, and some of the case management systems. Several times I've had people try to tell me, wrongly, how to use an application that I made. I especially like it when they tell me I should ask the people at the company. What company would that be? I tell them that it's very flattering that they think the software was made by an entire company instead of by me alone in my office. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work at the Courtyard Marriott Hotel, which is a hotel oriented for business people who have to go up early and work late. You know, real workhorses and road warriors. The hotel was a sprawling 5 stories tall with about 200 or so rooms. It was also right next to LAX, so we always got a lot of business people flying in thinking they were hot crap because their company flew them out to do business in LA. Whatever. This one day I'm working the front desk and it's kind of late, around midnight, and one of our guests comes in kind of drunk and asks me to reset his room key before he heads to his room because you always do them wrong. So I'm like, yep, sure thing, not a problem, have a good night. He comes back down 5 minutes later, visibly agitated, and says, "Oh, what the heck, man? I thought I told you to remake my keys. Can't you do your fricking job right?" And in the hospitality industry, you're not allowed to talk back or raise your voice, or really stand up for yourself. Your one and only goal is to make the guest feel welcome. So I apologize, take the blame, and say it won't happen again, and make him an extra key. He snatches them from my hand and storms off to his room. 5 minutes later, he comes back down again. "What is wrong with you? Are you stupid? Are you wasting my time on purpose? I'm heading to my room and you'd better come up with working room keys." And he throws his keys at me. My manager sees all of this happen and is like, "You know what? Let me handle this. You deserve a break." I'm fuming, of course. I go to the break room and just pace, wondering what gives people the audacity to act like that. My manager eventually comes back, enters the break room with a smile and clearly something to report. He says, he was going to the wrong floor. His room was actually 1 floor up. He said he's sorry. I wish I could have seen his face. When I worked as a cashier in a grocery store, people would always want to argue about their produce. They'd bring up heads of iceberg lettuce and then argue with me that they were green cabbage or vice versa. I'd always just smile, void the product, and then charge them for what they thought it was. The best was seeing people come back later angry that their coleslaw didn't work. The best, though, was the sweet potato versus yam argument that I'd have with people several times during the week leading up to Thanksgiving. Most of what we sell in the US are sweet potatoes, though some sweet potatoes grown in one state, Louisiana, are the yam variety of the sweet potato. But people often call them yams and will fight you over it, even though true yams are hard to find unless your store stocks stuff for Latin American customers. We did, but yams were rarely in stock and always more expensive than sweet potatoes. Anyway, sweet potatoes would go on sale for the holiday and people would buy lots of them. Every time I rang them up, I'd get told that they were yams and that I was dumb for not knowing that. So I'd void them and ring them up as yams are 4 times the price. When the customers would want the sale price, I'd kindly remind them that I'd tried to give them the sales price, but they'd ask me to ring them up as yams instead. I had a paper returned to me this morning because I didn't write out the full names of the authors in the manuscript. I took a screenshot of their submission guidelines detailing, "Author names must be formatted with the first initial followed by last name," and I sent it back. I got an apology email and a submission received notification a few minutes later. Academia. I swear to God. I was asked by my brother and girlfriend which planet is the first starting from the sun. I was then belittled for 20 minutes after asking Mercury because they were adamant it was Venus. I was just disappointed because we're in our 20s. Yeah, it's a little different when you share genes with the person and are just reminded of your bloodline's capacity for failure, I think. Still, the fact that you at least knew the right answer shows that hopefully one of you apples fell a long way from the family tree. Corporate trainer came to our offices to provide training. I popped into the room to say hello and see if she needed help. She was having trouble setting up the projector before the session. I started trying to help, but I'm not really savvy with projectors. She was getting frustrated with me as she assumed I was the IT dude, and obviously not a very good one. We eventually got it fixed and I offered her a coffee. She was a bit rude to me by that stage. I got her one anyway. Fast forward to the session itself, I introduced her to the room of 40 people and thanked her for coming. She realized then that I was the head of the division and was the one paying for her to be there. I felt quite smug at that point. She was flustered because she was trying to prepare for the meeting, but that's no excuse for crapping on the guy trying to help her. The interesting thing is, she has quite a public profile, podcast, and website, among other things, and is always preaching love and tolerance as part of her training. Clearly not that particular day. Oh, working in retail has those moments constantly. People don't read the signs right, and one guy didn't get the right chips for the deal and was getting mad at me and told me to come and he'll show me the sign. I'd already dealt with people not reading the fine print on that deal, so I told him, I'm not going to look at anything, you can go look for yourself, read it, and then come back with the right product. He came back without an attitude because he knew he was wrong, and from that point on, I always had my guard up when I saw him come in, and I was ready for a fight each time. My stepmom used to be an occupational therapist and would help the elderly in the hospital. One patient she had worked with was Vietnamese, so he didn't know English. He came with his son, so my stepmom decided to ask him about his father, but her coworker interrupted saying, I don't believe he speaks English. This whole time the son hadn't said a word while my stepmom was working with his father. When they were done, the father and son left, and as soon as they were at the door, the son turned around and said, Remember, I don't speak English. The coworker was dumbfounded when he said that, and all my stepmom could do was laugh. Oh sure, but I find the opposite is a better teaching environment. I was playing Street Fighter in a 7-Eleven. We'd been playing it I think for years and felt pretty confident in the game. Some 14-year-old comes in and starts telling us about the Guile handcuffs. We scoffed and laughed at him. Guile doesn't have handcuffs. And holy crap, he showed us the damn move. Granted, it was a bug, but I never forgot that. When I was in the army, me and a group of specialists were standing in a circle, taking a break in the motor pool. A lieutenant came out and said he needed a forklift driver and went around the circle pointing at each male and asked them if they had their license. None of them did. He huffed and walked away. He'd obviously skipped over the other female and I in the circle. That was fine. We were the only 88M, or heavy vehicle operators, and forklift licensed people there. The dudes were all paralegals and HR specialists. Everyone laughed. It was an embarrassing moment for him. I'm currently a junior in college, and a couple of weeks ago, when the semester started dying down, I left the dorms to come back home and finish things out online. I also started working at the local grocery store as well. Around a week ago, as I was checking out 2 customers, when they told me they wanted to pay 50-50 with 2 cards. Our system requires us to manually enter the price, so I did so, and the lovely gentleman told me my math was wrong and said he's a sophomore engineering student at a school nearby to help justify why he was correct. I respond, oh cool, I'm actually a junior at, and I inserted a much better engineering school. What are you studying? While also pulling up a calculator and showing him he was wrong. Everyone always assumes the workers here are dumb, so it's nice to show them otherwise. Some years ago, some guys were talking about cars and engines, and I don't even remember what else. One of them was really condescending to me, a female, and said, but you probably don't know anything about that, do you? My husband set him straight and said, she knows a lot more about cars than I do, so don't be so sure. Then of course the guy tried to prove he knew more. He did not. I grew up around race cars and auto mechanics, who also thought everyone should understand their own car. I have to admit I know less now that they're all electric and computerized, but this was back in the day. My wife and I were traveling with a couple we worked with in South Korea. We weren't the best friends with them, but they were nice enough, so we rented a car and traveled around the Isle of Jeju. Now, this is a small island that you could drive around in about 4 or 5 hours, but we were taking our time seeing the sights. The guy was a bit of a know-it-all, but they'd been in Korea 6 months longer than us, so I always took his advice. Anyway, I'm driving the car and we're trying to find the place that we want to eat, and I say something like, we're going the right way. And this guy responds with, no, we're going south. Trust me, I majored in geography. I look straight ahead into the setting sun and respond with, weird. We found the one place on Earth where the sun sets in the south. Well, that shut him up for a while. Honestly, despite the great joke in the Avengers movie that basically implies everyone knows where the sun sets, it's the kind of thing that I'd never think to look for. Good on you for being able to get some reprieve from a know-it-all with it. I was working as a teller in the bank years ago, and a Karen was complaining about how slow and crappy my computer was. If I'd been using an IBM, she'd have been out of there already. She works at IBM, they only make the best, fastest bank equipment. Blah, blah, blah. I slowly, deliberately turned my slow, crappy IBM computer for her to look at. Not another word. I'm French and live in France, but I grew up in the UK and consider English to be like my mother tongue. When I was 17, I had to change schools from a private one to a public one, and this was for personal reasons, but my new classmates assumed the reason was because my grades were too low and I got kicked out. That private school had high standards. Anyway, it's the first day of school and we have English class. The teacher hands out a list of sentences we have to translate and asks us to compare translations with our neighbor. The first sentence is rather hard to translate from French, and the teacher, having walked around and looked at our answers, announces that only one person in the class has got it right. We compare answers with our neighbors. The girl next to me sees my translation. How long has it been raining for? And she bursts out laughing. Has it been? Has it been? I've never heard that in my life. That is so stupid. And she makes fun of me for a good while to the other girl sitting next to her. Being new and also knowing that she was going to feel stupid in a couple of minutes, I didn't say anything. Sure enough, the teacher announces that I was right, and my classmates quickly discovered that I was actually a fluent English speaker with excellent grades pretty much all around. It made making friends really hard, but I hope that girl learned her lesson to never make fun of someone without knowing the full story. Or never make fun of people ever. That would be way better. Was talking about binary star systems at a party when suddenly my ex says, "That's not what a binary is, are you dumb?" Then another friend looked up the word binary and read it out loud to him and his eyes bugged out. I told him, "Stop pretending to be an expert on things you don't understand. It makes you look like an idiot." My ex was thinking of binary computer code. He didn't consider that other things could be binary too. Did your high school crush age like a fine wine or burn out like a bright star? Mine had a roller coaster of a life. I admire him more now than ever, and more than most people I know, but I can't wrap my head around why I ever found him physically attractive. Maybe it was just always his heart. By age 25, he had a PhD, a wife, and was captain in the Navy. By 30, he had 2 PhDs, a small business where he made a metric butt-ton of money, and his wife was preggers. By 31, he was diagnosed with stage 4 skin cancer that swiftly spread to his lymph nodes, bones, esophagus, and a few other places. He was told he had a minimal chances of making it more than 5 years. Even with the best health insurance money can buy, it still basically wiped him out. 7 years later, he's living a comfortable but not extravagant life as a civilian contractor for the Navy. Same wife and 2 happy, healthy kids, and spends most of his free time advocating for better public healthcare. I remember walking up to her and asking if we could talk in private. She said, "You can say what you need to in front of everyone else." Her group of friends was all around us, so I asked if she wanted to go on a date. She burst out laughing and said, no. It was rough, man. Looked her up last year and she's a cage fighter now. Mine, unfortunately, decided to not be alive anymore. Found out later she had a crush on me as well. Frick life sometimes. They began acting. It's weird. Every so often I'll see a commercial or something and be like, "Oh, hey, I know them." My crush is an incredibly sweet person, so I'm happy for them. I had 2 unrealized crushes in high school. One is a teacher and musician. She's married and has either 1 or 2 kids. We've kept in loose contact via social media and ran into each other at a New Year's Eve party shortly before she got married. I was introduced to her now husband as her favorite ex ever. He seemed like a decent guy and I'm happy for her. I believe the other crush became a US attorney. I haven't heard from her since Google Plus almost became a social media thing. I imagine she's still very productive and would be disappointed in my life choices. He's an attractive gay man, and I am none of those things. Same with my crush. He was my first serious crush and my first slow dance at a middle school dance. Now he's gay, attractive, was in the military, and owns a photography studio. He does some great headshots. My English teacher still looks fine as F. You know, I had wondered how many of these answers would be teachers, and that's our first confirmed one. We've had other people say that they had crushes who are teachers now, but I'm not sure if they were teachers or students at the time of said crush. My only girlfriend in high school was my crush. Her mum banned her from dating me after about a year because my girlfriend admitted to her mum that we were fooling around. This was about 20 years ago. She's still living with her mum, no kids, and as far as I know, never dated seriously after her mum broke us up. Still has the same job from high school too. It's like her mum went way into protective overdrive and my former girlfriend never got to grow up. It's really sad. I met her in 1987. We got married 5 years ago. We used to go to the same punk shows. That's where we met. Mine was my best friend. She turned out to be a criminal. She always liked younger guys, like when she was 17 and had a 13-year-old boyfriend, which was odd, but we were kids and didn't think about it much. Turns out her tastes didn't age with her and it became legally problematic. Found her on Tinder and she said I was hot. Pointed out that I was a loser that she used to know in high school, had a big laugh. Been a little over a year, now we send each other memes and hang out occasionally when the pandemic isn't being a hassle. She's still hot, successful, and a wealthy entrepreneur, and married someone with the same first name as me who quit his job to brew beer. I crushed on her for a bit, didn't think she was interested, so I dated other people. Then came to find out she crushed on me senior year, I was too dumb and blind, we connected freshman year of college, and she wrote me letters, and by the time I wised up, she'd moved on. Nobody to blame but myself. Dead by 32. Don't do substances, kids. You know, just seeing this is making me wonder what I ever saw in them. His friend unalived him over a girl. I had a childhood friend, he and I both had the same name, so we called each other by first name, last initial. He got killed in a similar fashion. He was only 24. It was freaking senseless, and the guy who killed him is going away for a long time. Was it worth it, buddy? I was a freshman and had a crush on a senior. To add to it, she was a cheerleader and her brother played quarterback for the football team, and got a college scholarship. She showed up at a football game a couple of years later with a baby in tow. She's married now and back in her hometown. That's about all I know. They both ended up as great guys. One has a huge family and is a minister. The other one only has one child and is a college professor. Both married nice people and they seem happy. They were really good guys in high school and ended up being really good adults. I've got both of them on Facebook and we keep in touch peripherally as we stayed friends over the years. I don't know about you guys, but I had way too many crushes in high school to be able to follow any one of them. Yeah, I had a lot of crushes, but the one that stands out was two sisters who both ended up becoming doctors. I did not become a doctor. An insanely talented molecular biology researcher at Boston, and she's still insanely attractive. Okay, people are writing to me and it looks like a lot of people feel like they know the same person. It's crazy how many hot molecular biologists people know. My crush is about to be my fiancé if all goes well. Became a professional cheerleader, died of cancer at 34. Googling names from high school is crazy. My first high school crush who sat next to me in freshman year English was a really cute punk rock girl, and she's gone on to become an incredibly hot fitness model. Haha, my husband. Our first marriages didn't work out and we reconnected after our divorces. If only I would have confessed I had a crush on him in high school, might have saved myself a lot of trouble. Huh. My crush is still hot as F. Yep, they still don't know you exist either. I briefly worked with mine and didn't realize it was her until I left for another job. She looked almost unrecognizable, but it was 15 years after I last saw her. She's married with a couple of kids now, so pretty standard life, I guess. My friend's high school crush was Tom Holland, like they went to the same school. I never made a move in high school. About 7 years after graduating, I saw her on social media and said, "What the hell?" and asked her out. We've been dating for about 2 years and I'm about to pop the big question. This hot D-bag who doesn't really do much except to go to the gym. To be fair, that's how he was in high school, I just liked it back then. If you wanted to always date Chip Matthews from high school, you're gonna end up on a date with Chip Matthews from high school. Yeah, isn't it weird how some of the winners from school end up peaking there and then unless they're capable of change? I know a lot of former people who might have been described as losers in school whose quality of life and status has changed so drastically once they move to a different environment. So don't lose hope in school, kids. Back when I was younger and crushing hard, I got on AOL Instant Messenger and had gotten my crush's screen name from a friend. I worked up the nerve to start a conversation with him, and soon after some awkward small talk, he sent me a message in Comic Sans, black background, red lettering, and in French. I then went to Google for translation and found out he'd just called me a pig in French. Being a seemingly awkward and chubby teenager, I was literally crushed. The heartbreak was only made worse by remembering that a few weeks prior, I'd selected to take French class the next year and couldn't change it. Years later, now that I've blossomed, he follows me on every social media platform and has reached out a couple of times to try and flirt or hang out. Hard pass, man. I believe he's now moved away and is a teacher. I ended things a few years after high school. She was a teacher and got caught having an affair with a female student. Took too many substances and unfortunately passed away last year. I got to see him before he was taken off life support with a really good mutual friend we shared, who was an organ donor too. It was surreal seeing him dwarfed by all these machines. He had one of the largest hearts I've ever come across. She ended up getting knocked up by a freshman shortly after we graduated. She passed away our senior year, 6 months after she agreed to marry me after we graduated. She's still a 10 for looks. I'm sure she kept on as the amazing kind person that she was. She moved to another country, speaks multiple languages, and is more successful than I imagined. Seems happy, but we haven't talked since the time I told her how I felt about 20 years ago. Went on to be a teenaged model for hair products, graduated from Yale, toured Europe, opened her own successful ceramics company that's sold worldwide, and is often written up in magazines. Makes me feel like crap every time I think of her. Going to an all-boys school sucks for having realistic crushes. However, I ran into one of the teachers years later, and she still looks bellissima. I checked when I saw the question, and she's actually a very successful artist and an art teacher from a renowned university in France. She even got decorated for her work, Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres. It's a big deal award. My high school ex randomly sent me a text years after we split up that went, "I know you don't like metal, but I thought you would like this," and a link to a clarinet cover of a metal song. I played clarinet in high school. Little did he know that I hated playing clarinet and was now a total metalhead. My crush has a dog and I don't. There was a girl I really admired for a while. She didn't really give me the time of day after freshman year though. She was co-valedictorian and hugged me as I crossed the stage at graduation, and nobody else got a hug. I'm still really confused about that 6 years later. She went on to med school and is either married or at least engaged to a guy she met there. Overall, she's doing really well and I'm happy for her. Sounds like she's a nice person and probably knew you liked her, but didn't want to give you the wrong idea. She probably hugged you because she hoped for the best for you. You were her #1 fan. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had several. One of them's still a close friend and he became a primary care doctor. He also officiated my wedding. There's another one who I have no idea what happened to. We didn't really have overlapping friend groups and she doesn't do social media. One of them is a math professor now, so that's pretty cool. But my biggest crush in high school was my longtime neighbor, but it also fizzled out pretty quickly after we went to homecoming together. We're still good friends and our families still keep in touch. He's also the guy who introduced me to my husband. I had 3. 1 from the first 2 years and 2 from the last 2. The first one is now female to male trans, who walked to Colorado to join a cult or commune. He's now in Arizona recording rap albums. The second girl moved to Florida and lives in a swamp. She periodically hits me up to tell me she misses me and how dumb I was that I didn't follow through and that we should get married. The third was a missionary. She wasn't really into it once she grew up, came back home, and I introduced her to one of my closest friends. They've been married for 15 years. 0 out of 3. Why didn't you marry Shrek, the second one? Hedge fund manager with a trophy wife. She turned out great. She married me. We actually met in kindergarten. We reconnected through Facebook in our late 40s. Now I can't stand Facebook anymore. Now she's my wife. She's still beautiful. One I don't keep track of at all. I'm not sure what she's up to. The other one I married. She turned out awesome. I'm just checking in to confirm that I was no one's high school crush, and carry on. Ditto. Nobody's written about a YouTube narrator with a weird accent yet. One day, narrator. One day. Still super hot, she married some loser and has a few kids with him. That loser was me. We just celebrated 22 years of marriage. One I don't keep track of at all. I'm not sure what she's up to. The other I married. She turned out awesome. Blink twice if you're being held hostage. She worked with the Obama administration, I forget in what capacity. Got married to some politician's son. I don't remember and don't care to look it up. She's happy and that's the only thing that matters. Oh, she was also our school's valedictorian. She was so busy with her job that she couldn't organize our high school reunion, so that's a plus. I wasn't head over heels for her, I admired her, but I knew I wasn't for her. Then there's another crush of mine. We ran into each other years after graduation at a grocery store. After talking, I asked her out to dinner at my house. I pull out all of the stops, I buy rainbow trout fillet and make up all the fixings. 6:30 rolls around, I open the door, and who the hell is that man behind her? Oh, this is my fiancé. She'd neglected to tell me she was bringing him. Turns out they wanted to sell me on some multi-level marketing thing. She tried to cross the threshold, I put my arm out and asked them politely to leave. I turned away from the door and had my saddest meal that I've ever eaten in my life. Pretty good. Seems to have her life together, although she had a few setbacks. She's gone back to uni since job prospects in her field kinda sucked, but seems to be really enjoying it. She's dating me though, so clearly her judgment sucks. I found out she was fat and unattractive. Then I realized I was too. He turned out pretty well, joined the military and served for a number of years. He was in after Vietnam and out before the Gulf War, so I'm not sure if he actually saw much active duty. He then settled in Korea where he trained in Taekwondo and did a lot of professional fighting and won a bunch of awards. Attained the rank of Grand Master and returned to the US and opened a very successful school that specializes in Taekwondo and Hapkido. He's opened additional locations and is currently looking to open one in our old hometown. I imagine that will have to wait until after COVID. I had a few in high school. One ended up moving away after sophomore year and nobody knew why. She reached out to me when I had a mental breakdown online and said that she could understand what I was going through. Some effed up crap happened to her, though she never said what specifically. I didn't ask further because it wasn't my business to pry. I'm not sure how she is now. Another one got super hot after high school and she did a degree in science. Again, not sure where she is now, but I think she's doing alright. And the third works at a bank. We ended on bad terms. Partially my fault. I found out she was making fun of me behind my back and had done so for months beforehand, so I sent her an angry message. I haven't seen her since then. Still cute as heck, one of the kindest and most sensitive people I know, and still one of my best friends 15 years later. He also recently divorced. His wife was gay, but needed time and support to come to terms with it. Now he and I are slowly testing the waters. What started as a crush has matured into a deep and rich friendship, and however it might unfold, I'm so grateful to have that relationship in my life. That's how I got my husband. His wife left him for his best friend. Obviously, he was going through a divorce after, and we became best friends. We were always good friends, but it got so much better and we fell in love. It's been 10 years and I can't believe I married such a little hottie. Good luck! She was aware of the crush then, over 30 years ago, but it was unrequited. We've been in casual contact through her Facebook for the past several years, and once before that, my wife at the time, and I had her and her husband over for dinner. From what I can tell, she's grown into a person I probably would have been happy with. It's nice to see my high school perspective got a few things right. I think we'd be good friends if we lived closer. She appears to be living a good life with her husband and family. With my second wife, I'm happier than I could have ever imagined. Life worked out well. Turns out I was attracted to losers and burnouts. That hasn't changed much. Turns out he's gay and got fired from a teaching job for having inappropriate behavior with his male students. Ugh, mine are all stunning and wildly successful. One in particular was a crush with a similar name to mine, dating back from my elementary school, which turned out to be the longest crush, an entire decade, and still appearing in a looping dream sequence to this day. Especially after that bitter and frankly traumatic rejection before we parted ways when I confessed to her. At that point, we were classmates for 5 years and were going to different schools. After the separation, that's when the dreams began, and every time I woke up I was feeling emotional all over again. It took me another painful 5 years before I stopped crushing on her, but the dreams never stopped. Just last week I had an update to the dream sequence where we actually talked for the first time in a decade of Groundhog Day levels of dreams. I know, it's pathetic. Life update on that particular crush though. She's currently aspiring to be an architect and had an equally cool boyfriend, so I doubt she ever looked back on her past as much as I do. I recently tried to follow her on her socials to get a life update from herself, but she won't accept my requests, so I'm not going to force her. She's a TikTok influencer who shaved off her eyebrows and draws symbols on her face. Yeah. One is still active duty in the military and has a very successful career as an officer. I hope she continues. The other is successful in the arts, and I hope she continues to be that as well. Both are married to others who treat them well. I'm happy that they're both happy. My life is still going good here, so I have no hard feelings. She married some idiot and had my babies. Man, I hope you can get your babies back. Best of luck! Yeah, I was about to say, either this is very sweet or you have very much wronged some other poor guy. If it's the latter, I hope you, your crush, and the hapless fellow in question can sort out an agreement regarding your illegitimate offspring. The guy I crushed on for 2.5 years did not end up turning out great. I'm still friends with his younger sister, so I know that he's recently acquired his 3rd DUI and his 2nd divorce. He's currently living in his friend's basement and occasionally works for his friend's moving company as a mover, but only when he feels like it. He spends all of his money on booze and owes the 2 mums of his 5 kids tons of child support. But man, was he hot in high school. My second crush in high school is the only reason I got over my first crush. He's currently doing great, mostly because he gets to be married to me for going on 20 years. Harvard, degrees in writing and medicine, became a lead surgeon in a major city. Extremely proud of her. Always had her on a pedestal, I guess with good reason. One of them is homeless and a substance addict. It's very sad. The other one is famous in his home country, is a best-selling author, and is regularly on TV. Don't have a crush on him anymore, but I'm glad we're still friends, and I'm happy for how well he's done. I guess they balance each other out. Multiple degrees, on track to becoming a full-time educator, mother of 2, and my wife. I'm so lucky. Turned out to be gay. So did I. It worked out perfectly. Divorced with 2 kids. I took her and her kids to lunch after meeting her in a mall one day. I hadn't seen her in over 10 years. We caught up on some small talk and I asked the kids if they were hungry, and they said yes. I just wanted to spend more time with her. After lunch, I asked if I could see her again, and she laughed at me and said, "I could never go out with someone like you." She said the exact same thing to me in high school. That's my life. I'm not good enough for anyone. Nah, dude, screw that. I get not being attracted to someone, but saying it like that is super messed up, especially after you fed her kids. Like at least say, "Let's be friends," or something. He's still hot, got a part-time scholarship to study engineering, and is now dating a Miss Spain runner-up. She's bi and married a woman. She's a speech therapist now. Still really good looking and still a nice person. I'm happy her life turned out well. A racist person who has 3 kids with 3 different women. I'm glad I was too shy to ever make a move on him. Mine is just the same as when we were leaving school. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why he is an ex. What happened when you found the secret room in your home? I found the secret space in my closet when my mum and I were moving out of the house where she was renting to move into my stepdad's house. I never noticed it because junk covered the section of the wall that was covering a small entrance to a room that was sealed off with boards and plywood. I couldn't pry it open, but I could see light shining in and a single mason jar filled with what I assumed was water. The air was cold in there, like as if the central heating didn't even reach that part. I showed it to my mum and she told me that she doesn't remember seeing that there when we moved in 8 years prior. But since we were moving out, it didn't matter. The room gave me the creeps for whatever reason. I don't know why it was sealed off or why there was a single mason jar filled with water in the center of the room. I lived in a warehouse in Melbourne. Always thought it would be cool to get on the roof, but there was no access. After about 6 months, I'm standing in front of a mirror upstairs when I notice it has hinges. I push on it, clicks and opens out, revealing a small attic and roof hatch. That was pretty cool. Used to sit up there and watch the sunset over the city. It wasn't a room, but after living in our house for a few years, we decided to remodel the basement bathroom. Tore out the old shower enclosure and found a window behind it. Said window was covered on the outside by an apron of siding that came from the cantilevered room upstairs all the way down to the concrete pad. We tore off the siding apron and let some light in. It was much better. We were doing a bathroom reno as well, but also there was a covered window because you could still see the window from the outside. Ripped off the shower enclosure and now we have a nice window in our bathroom. Why people would cover up a window leaves me confused. We moved into a house with a door in the kitchen that could not be opened. The real estate tried but failed, assumed it led to the laundry room but was walled off. My older siblings, like any typical teenagers, were not convinced about this and were determined to open it. It was just a normal pantry, but they never told our mother that they managed to get the door open and used to hide things like alcohol, smokes, and green herb. Watched Home Alone and saw the attic that Macaulay Culkin was staying in and wondered if we had one in our townhouse. Ran around with a stepladder until I found it in my mum's closet. Got my tiptoes on the stepladder and fought the door open. It ended up being a big piece of plywood. And then I peered into the attic. A mouse colony stared back. It was like that scene in Ratatouille. Decades worth of mouse droppings covering the entire space. My mum wasn't happy once I told her. We moved shortly afterwards. Oh god. That feels like one of those things you close up and hope like heck people don't discover while they're viewing the house. Mouse infestation might take you down a bit in value. Also, they're too cute for me to exterminate with a clean conscience. My parents bought a house from an old family member to help her pay for nursing home care. She hadn't lived in the house for years at that point. She was a hoarder and we were tasked with cleaning up the house over the course of the summer in order to make it livable prior to the start of school. Rat carcasses fused to the carpet, old tax documents from the 60s. Well, we were scraping up the linoleum tiling, covering the original hardwood floor, disappointingly enough, in a side room when I made the joke about the previous resident being a secret mass killer and that there was a trapdoor under the linoleum full of dead bodies. Pulled up a huge section of tiling, only to find a trapdoor underneath. Scared the crap out of me, but when we finally built up enough courage to open the damned thing, we discovered there was nothing under there. It was a walled-off section of the basement with a dirt floor. We suspect it was an old root cellar from back when farmers had to store their crap in a cold, dark place to prevent it from spoiling. A couple of years ago, I rented an apartment that was in a massive old architecture-style building. No idea how old it was. I remember when I did the showing, they showed me a door that had an elaborate staircase that went straight up to the ceiling and explained that it went to the attic, which was sealed up. When I was finally moving out, curiosity got the best of me and I pushed on the panel at the top of the stairs until it popped open and I hoisted myself up there. It was completely dark and the floor was covered in at least an inch of dust, and I found out that it was an entire extra floor to my unit. There was some old rotting furniture and magazines littered throughout the rooms. I eventually found a small hole in one of the walls that went into the sealed-off upstairs of the unit next to mine, and I decided to go through that one too. I found a smaller hole at the back end of that area that led to the next one. I eventually made my way through about 5 or 6 of these sealed-off spaces that had no entrances save these small holes in the drywall. The further I went in, the older the furniture I found. Fridges from the 50s or earlier, old dishware, and so much dust over everything. The last unit was the most interesting. Hand-painted scenes on the walls and holes to the attic letting sunlight stream in. I took small videos, but they're all on Snapchat, so they're hard to post. I must have been up there for hours just exploring alone in the dark. I was pretty lucky to have the only room with access up there. When clearing out my grandma's house, I found a small door in the wall of the basement that led to a tiny room. According to my mother, that's where they hid the family heirlooms when thieving relatives came to town. I was mostly interested in the fact that it was covered in scribbles from my mum and her sisters growing up. Back in college, some friends and I rented an old mansion that had been built in the early 1920s by an elderly lady. The place was falling apart, but it was huge and rent was dirt cheap. About 2 years into living there, I went to the basement to do some laundry and momentarily lost balance, reaching out to steady myself on one of the wall panels. It flexed more than I expected, and after some inspection, I found that it was removable. Behind it was a small, mostly empty, very dirty concrete room about 100 square feet. I say mostly empty because right in the middle there was a hole the size of a well that had been previously bricked up. It must have been old because the bricks had eroded at some point and exposed some of the hole, maybe 2 feet in diameter out of the full 5 feet. After calling my friends down to look at it, I got the courage to creep a little closer and peered down into it. There was another room, roughly the same size but deep, maybe 15 feet down and mostly dirt. We shined a flashlight into it, and I could swear there was a teddy bear at the bottom. Unfortunately, despite plenty of bargaining, none of us were ever able to work up the courage, liquid or regular, to tie a rope and climb down for a closer look, especially after we noticed that the bricks which I thought had fallen in were all accounted for, scattered around the hole as if something had broken outwards. At the risk of this account being discovered by my friends, this was in Pittsburgh. We did a little research, and I think the sub-basement might have been related to prohibition, but honestly, I'm just willing to accept that explanation in order to avoid lifelong nightmares of creatures bursting out. My friend had a thing like this in their basement in Boston. They called it the Hole, and we had weird hole-themed parties. Helping my granddad move house, we accidentally found access to the underfloor area. Not even big enough to really call a crawl space, I don't think. Spotty memory. There was a small pile of trash from the 60s or 70s. Juice cans, chocolate bar wrappers, and crumpled newspapers, and bits of discarded construction debris and some broken tools. We think it must have been used by the builders in lieu of a trash can. It was cool, an accidental time capsule. It was about a year into owning our house. We actually found 2 secret rooms. One was just a room under the stairs that was closed off. Had some toys from the 70s in it. The really crazy one was when we redid the insulation in our attic. One of the workers asked if I knew there was a room up there. I had no idea. So we cut open the drywall and there were stacks on stacks of boxes from the 60s. Like a ton of boxes, and they were all full. So I opened them up expecting some cool stuff, and they were frickin' full of pine cones. One of the biggest bummers of my life. Moved into an 18th century farmhouse as a little kid, and found a small panel door in the back of the large closet in my small room. Turned out to be a small finished room over the eaves that had a small portal window. I spent hours in that room reading and hiding from the world. I think any child would love to have this. Honestly, I think most adults, including the narrator, would love to have it too. I might even have put my recording booth in there, although actually it sounds like it has too much cozy reading potential. Thank goodness your family never counted the windows. There was a hidden door behind the wallpaper. Obviously, the doorknob had been taken off, so it blended in with the wall. We lived in this house for 6 years, and I found out about this door in our hallway 2 years ago when we opened it up and I saw a skeleton in the corner. I'm not going to lie, that scared me shirtless, although it was just a prop left by the past owners of our house. It was probably left there to scare the crap out of you when you found it as a joke. While installing Cat 5e network cables many years ago in my house, I discovered a short and squat cast iron water heater inside some walls, between a staircase and a bathroom, connecting the basement and the next level of our house. I'm guessing whoever did the remodel didn't think that the little bit of space that could be reclaimed was worth it. I found it when I realized my measurements weren't making sense and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't seeing my Ethernet cable. I had to plot everything out carefully because of the split-level nature of my house, the crawl spaces, the basements, stuff like that. I figured there was 3 feet of space unaccounted for. It will probably be removed when we remodel the basement bathroom. I figure I can either get more storage space or a full bathtub instead of just a shower stall that's there now. Growing up, my dad's hoarding was pretty bad and my childhood home was pretty old. Around my pre-teens, I started trying to navigate through the clutter to parts of the house I'd truly never seen because of all the junk. I found this door that had been blocked off and I eventually moved stuff around enough that I could open the door, which was hard because the room was big, but he filled it so much that the only way to navigate it was a single narrow path through the clutter. Behind the door was trippy to me as a kid because the back couple of rooms in the house were rotted and collapsed in places, so my parents just blocked it off, I guess. Going from my packed house to this completely empty, collapsing ruin was actually really interesting to me. I used to try and navigate through it until one day I fell through the floor and landed underneath the house, with my head a couple of inches from a nail pointing up from the ground. I don't remember if I ever went back through the door after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not quite a secret room or space, but when my parents were doing renovations on our childhood home, the house was roughly 100 years old at the time, they found an old safe, quite small, in the wall that had been left open with a bottle of either port or rum and a long faded note inside. The builder helping Dad said it was common to find the odd bottle of alcohol in walls during renos on old homes, as there was a tradition for a while where one homeowner leaves a hidden bottle for the next to find during a time of construction or renovations. We couldn't determine how old the bottle was, as all of the labeling had faded, but Dad went and bought a new bottle of port and put it in the old safe with a laminated note before sealing it back up for the next owner to find. My old house was a duplex. There was a hobbit-sized door on the bottom floor, and I glanced in there a few times but only saw pipes and different electrical units and stuff. There was some sort of landlord's, maybe past residents junk in the corner. After a few years, I explored behind it and realized it led to the other half of the duplex. We bought a house that had been built in the 1880s, lived in it for 7 years and then had to have some wiring work done. The electrician was working down in the basement and wanted to drill through a brick wall to the outside for some reason that I no longer remember. We gave him the okay and go about our business. He starts drilling and then stops, comes upstairs and tells us he's just found a bricked up room and what do we want to do about it. Well, we still kind of want our wiring situation taken care of, but if there's a body and some amontillado in there, I definitely want to know. On the other hand, I don't want to let my sister's boyfriend knock the wall down with a sledgehammer. As we're discussing this, the electrician offers to run a scope through the hole he's just drilled so we can take a look without doing more damage, or as he put it, destroying evidence. So, our new friend gets his scope set up and we all go down to the basement and watch the monitor. It's a very small space, maybe 3 by 5 feet. Nothing in there but a really old, gross-looking plushie. Not a teddy bear, maybe a dog? It was sewed out of some kind of patterned fabric in a vaguely dog-like shape. That's it, nothing else. The electrician asks us what we want to do. I ask if he can seal the hole he just drilled because this is definitely how ghost movies start. He agreed and patched it up. Drilled somewhere else, finished the rewiring, and we all continued our lives. We moved out 2 years later, and as far as I know, Haunted Doggy is still bricked up in the basement of that house. Found it moving in. Latch at the bottom of the corner of the closet. Cape Cod-style house, crawl space to basically uncarpeted room with 2 windows over garage. I fell through one time. Hidden closet in a basement wall after 20 years of living in this home. We found some personal documents with no real interest, a newspaper from the day after Pearl Harbor, and a hand-drawn cartoon of pregnant Lucy yelling, "God damn it, Charlie Brown!" I found a stash of firearms in a secret room underneath my staircase a week after moving in. In my house, there was an upstairs bedroom that was made into a game room for me and my sister. When we were about 12 years old, we realized that a section of the paneling came off and there was a small closet-sized room behind it. We kept it a secret so that when friends came over, we'd have the ultimate hiding spot for hide and seek. A few years later, we were talking to our parents about what we found, and they said that the house was built during the Prohibition era, so they most likely used it as a place to hide alcohol. You know, I would have never guessed that Prohibition-era stashing would be one of our most recurring answers here. Turns out every other person was just holding a keg and some bottles of whiskey for whenever the local speakeasy was closed. The more you know. There was a small door under some stairs, almost like Harry Potter's room in my old apartment in Venezuela. We'd lived there for a year until I leaned on it and felt it wiggle a little and realized it was a small square door. I was too scared to open it, so I had my dad do it, and about 20 or so cockroaches flooded out. Never have I felt so much panic. I went to visit my grandparents a few months after they'd moved into a new house out in the country. I got into a bit of horseplay with a cousin and got shoved into a wall. It broke a big hole and we realized there was a large empty space back there. With Grandpa's help, we tore the wall down and found a little room full of planting trays and grow lamps. There was a number of books about horticulture and one specifically about growing Mary J. There was no secret way in as far as we could tell. Someone had just walled off the entire room for some reason. In a house a friend was renting, I realized that there was a missing 5 feet between the back wall of the master bedroom and the back wall of the garage. Poking around the garage, I found a piece of plywood with concealed hinges, held shut with 2 nails. Opened it and found a 12 by 5 room with walls covered with foil and a couple of outlets for lamps on the ceiling. My friend converted it into a walk-in closet. I lived in the house of my grandma for a few years. The secret room beneath a trapdoor on the second floor was basically a void between walls on the complicated first floor. It was used to hide Jewish families during World War II. We couldn't find the access to the crawl space during the first inspection. We didn't want to buy the house until we saw every inch, especially vibratio foundation. Turns out one of the closets had such a perfect carpet job you couldn't tell the floor was a carpeted door. You have to pull the carpet to lift it. Nothing interesting in there apart from a small crack. My student house at university. I lived there a couple of months before the gas meter guy came around and asked where the meter was. Us 4 clueless students had no idea, so he was like, maybe it's in the basement. We said we didn't have a basement. He basically says, sure you do. Goes over to the edge of the carpet in the hall, pulls it up and reveals a large door in the floor, which leads to a basement. The gas meter turned out to be out back, but we liked our new basement. I had to do this a lot when installing TV. You don't have an attic, so I've got to get under the house. Way too many people don't realize they're sitting on top of anything from a simple crawl space to a full-on basement. A lot of the time they're renters and the landlord doesn't want them in the basement for whatever reason. It's not my problem, I'm just running cable. I bought a house back in 2010. There was a wooden box next to an old oak tree in my backyard. It had no doors and no way to look into it. The box was about as big as a love seat and it looked as old as the house, about 30 years. But it was very well kept, no bug damage. I waited for about 2 years until I got the nerve to open it, and it was empty. It wasn't our house, but a secret room in our barn. When we moved to the property, the barn was full of all kinds of stuff, so it took about 5 years to find it. We were kids building a fort, moved some old wooden packing boxes and found a little door. There was a bunch of Christmas decorations from the 70s, including a cutout of Santa, so when we saw his head we thought we'd found a body. I never said we were smart kids. Once we realized it was just decorations, we crawled in to explore and fell through the floor to the rooms below. Good times when my dad found the collapsed ceiling in the wood shop. Whoops! My old house had this weirdly large concrete slab in the corner of the yard that was covered by a ton of leaves when we moved in. I thought it was maybe the foundation for a shed, but it was in a very odd location. Years later, when I was getting ready to move, it bugged me that I didn't know what it was for. I got a friend to help me come dig around it, expecting to confirm that it was just an old foundation. We dug for days in the middle of August. We had to start digging at night to protect ourselves from the heat. We got about 15 feet down and the concrete wasn't showing any signs of ending. We eventually struck a pipe with a nozzle and discovered that there was more concrete moving towards the center of the yard. About a week later, my dad came home and almost had a stroke when he saw we were digging up half the yard. We'd sold the house and were expected to leave by September 1st. He made us fill it all in and I left home never finding out what it was. Some of my teachers, who were long-term town residents, told me that my neighborhood had been farmland before development and that there may have been several bomb or fallout shelters in the area. I would have loved to have found an entrance into the bunker if that's what it was. I just googled concrete septic tank and it definitely seems like you were trying to get into an old tank of poo-poo. Yeah, as cool as finding a fallout shelter seems, I think on the off chance that you could have cracked open a container filled with feces, you were probably better off not knowing, right? Not my house, but my elementary school, a small one in the countryside. 1990, after some PE hours, a friend of mine and I were horsing around downstairs in the basement outside the locker rooms. In the process, we tackled each other with shoulder pushes, and my friend flew into a panel at some point, where a screw popped out of a panel that revealed overpainted screws that revealed a panel door. The janitor thought it was just the ducts for air or a water pipe maintenance under the school when we told him about the door, and asked, and he said he came to the school in 1971, but never had been in there. Of course, the two of us being 6th graders, we had to go on a hunt and later returned with a screwdriver after school hours. The school wasn't locked due to an after-school club in the same place. We entered with a flashlight. It was a secret basement of ducts at first, super dusty, and metal stamps revealed at least something in the corridors was built in 1959. The school was built in the 1950s. But the fun part was when the 1x1 meter ducts suddenly ended out in a slightly larger room, 2 meters tall and probably 5 meters by 2 meters total. It had old equipment, like tables and stuff with military emblems on them, and we thought, of course, it could have been an old Third Reich headquarters or something, not adding 2 and 2 together to figure out that the school was built later than 1945. But it was an old nuclear shelter thing that later was revealed to be a cancelled part of the school. Like planned and built, but never executed properly due to the budget, and the ducts had been the old ducts for maintenance of water and sewage pipes. So exciting, but in the end, just a budget-cut nuclear shelter with closets, blankets, tables, and a little kitchenware of military origin. But holy crap did we feel like Indiana Jones at that moment. What war crimes do the good guys in media commit against the so-called bad guys? In Stargate Atlantis, the goodies capture a wraith and perform medical experiments on him. A recent example I can think of is in Without Remorse, where you're supposed to believe that Michael B. Jordan is making a heroic one-man stand during a Black Ops mission in Russia, until you realize the Russian police and soldiers are responding to what appears to be a terror incident rather than the movie's villain blowing himself up, and have no clue who's shooting at them. Is it really Tom Clancy IP without a few war crimes sprinkled in under the guise of heroism? Oddly enough, in Red Storm Rising, he has an American airman get captured and treated well by his Soviet interrogator, and he ends up talking quite a bit. Shows how well that technique works compared to torture. You remember the time the Powerpuff Girls beat up Mojo Jojo while he was in jail doing absolutely nothing wrong? The girls should be tried for what they've done to Mojo, seriously. There's an episode in some of the more recent Powerpuff Girls where Bubbles gets a bad haircut and I think something happens to her face so she feels ugly and decides she wants to be evil. She goes to Mojo Jojo's lair and asks to team up, and he's like, "No, I'm literally relaxing. I don't want to do evil stuff with you right now, Bubbles." But she keeps insisting, so he's like, "Fine, okay, whatever." And then Blossom and Buttercup come and mess up Mojo Jojo, and Bubbles switches back to their side. Then they blame the situation on Mojo Jojo and call him ugly. It was so screwed. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Everything. When I remembered that General Grievous staged an attack on a medical facility, I began to wonder if the writers had a checklist of all the Geneva Convention rulings they could fit into the show. The Republic commits war atrocities all the time, and so do the rebels. Star Wars is full of war crimes on all sides. In the Star Trek Discovery pilot, they booby-trap dead bodies, which is a war crime. Yes, maybe in the future the Geneva Convention has been updated, they actually name-check that it still exists in Episode 3 of Season 1, but you'd expect it to change for the better, not give the okay for the same tactics extremists use today. They also try to murderize a whole planet, but compromise to overthrowing the legitimate ruling government. In Star Trek Enterprise, Archer threw a guy into an airlock and decompressed it until the guy talked. James Bond commits multiple acts of torture and frequently threatens unarmed people with assault or even death. This is played almost as satire in the later movies, where he's portrayed unambiguously as a complete sociopath. In a sense, that's getting back to the source material. The original Bond in Ian Fleming's works was portrayed as being cold and ruthless, and quite possibly a sociopath of sorts. Yes, the narrator actually enjoys that the Craig films do portray Bond as someone who should not at all be emulated rather than a cool role model. Too bad that so many people failed to see that. People are dumb. Isn't Ender's Game about tricking a child into committing xenocide? Yeah, but the terrible psychological effect that it has on Ender is the whole point of the book, something the movie sadly neglected. The end of the movie takes place 2/3 of the way into the book. A huge plot arc of that series is Ender trying to figure out how to deal with his own internal grief at what he's done, while simultaneously being praised as a hero. Well, the second book is all about trying to make things right by finding a new planet for the Queen. Star Wars. The Republic is literally creating human beings with short lifespans, puts control chips in their brains, and indoctrinates them to feed them into the meat grinder. That is 40k levels of dark. Also, everyone has way more than necessary sapient droids that get treated like slaves at best. The basic battle droids could probably beat the Turing test, and even the Jedi kill them basically for fun. The droids' right issues are hilariously unexplored. Every droid you see blasted is at least semi-sentient and held in slavery. They're clearly able to feel emotions and pain. Torture is typically a default. The protagonist doesn't have time to play by the rules, so he tortures info out of the person. Hollywood loves to show that torture is the only way to get info out of someone when it's actually not only a war crime, but the least reliable method. Only Captain America used the steak and potatoes method. In the last Hunger Games movie, didn't the good guys drop medical supplies only just for half of them to be bombs to make the bad guys look bad? Yeah, they committed a really nasty false flag attack against children. To be fair, it's a major plot point that turns Katniss against them. She even shoots the head of District 13 afterwards. Also, her sister was not old enough to be a volunteer army medic according to District 13, who were so militant about rules. Coin was a control freak, so she would have had to specifically made the decision to send Prim and also been aware of the tactics they were going to use. Inglorious bastards. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to scalp people. This is a good answer because they actually are in a war, and a lot of answers here are just regular crimes. The protagonists in that film scalp dead and dying soldiers, they execute prisoners of war and disfigure survivors. Even Landa has a line near the end, during the make a deal scene, something like, "As of right now, your plan, which some would call a terror plot, is still a go." I mean, he's got a point. The plan is to essentially assassinate the German high command by bombing a theater full of citizens. Fake surrendering and harming someone after they've surrendered. Every other damn action movie. I remember when I first played Skyrim, this guy said, I yield, and stopped attacking. I held back, thinking this was some sort of nifty game mechanic, and then he went right back to trying to kill me. I was annoyed. A lot of good guys flirt with or outright commit torture in interrogation sessions. Remember, it's considered bad to physically attack someone when they can't fight back, no matter what the circumstances, and in the real world it usually doesn't work. Torture makes people say whatever the torturer wants them to say, not what they actually need to hear. People who don't know anything will come up with the most elaborate stories to make it stop. Not to mention guerrilla forces are quite selective with information to prevent spies and defectors from gleaning anything useful. Heck, I wonder if a guerrilla commander ever deliberately gave a fighter false info to let him be captured and have the false information tortured out of him so the opposing forces would walk right into an ambush. In Community, Pierce Hawthorne fakes a heart attack to shoot one of City College's stormtroopers, then disguises himself in the guy's armor and shoots the remaining stormtroopers to win a paintball tournament for Greendale. Whenever somebody fakes a surrender, it's disturbing how many people writing back to me don't know that you can't fake a surrender. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a master of the fake surrender. I just got past Kong Prell in the Clone Wars, and Obi-Wan did the fake surrender at least 3 times by then. That's Season 4. There are so many war crimes in the Clone Wars, and those are just the ones shown. That scene in Saving Private Ryan where they shoot the unarmed Czech conscripts. That was literally against the rules of engagement, and a damn tragedy. Could have happened in real life too. Imagine being forced to fight for Germany and just when you think it's over, you get killed by your perceived saviors. Perfidy, which is a fancy word for surrendering only to whip around and start killing your captor. It's seen a lot in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Inglorious bastards. Beating surrendered combatants with a baseball bat is not great, to be honest. I love the scene in which the Germans watch a propaganda film in Shoshana's theater, and they're all cheering and clapping like idiots at the obviously romanticized Third Reich hero mowing down ally soldier after ally soldier when you realize you, as a viewer, have been doing essentially the same thing. Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars is notorious for falsely surrendering to the Separatists. He did this in Season 7, Episode 9 to lure the tactical droid out of hiding on a battlefront before the Siege of Mandalore. Given a lot of his conduct, we can grant Anakin the right of master when it comes to war crimes. False surrender, ridiculously common in Star Wars, World War II films, and middle schools. This regards cop movies more, but I've recently been rewatching some absolute bangers from the 80s, including Lethal Weapon, Tango and Cash Action, Jackson, and it's hilarious how insane and borderline sadistic the cops are. Have you ever considered what a psycho John McClane is to kill some guy, put a Christmas elf hat on him and write, Now I have weapon we can't say on YouTube, ho ho ho, on his shirt in Die Hard. It's such a funny 80s trope that cops were supposed to be these rule-breaking fanatics. Don't forget Die Hard 5 when he causes an accident, sucker punches a guy, and steals a car. I am dying over here at the fact that half this group is just Star Wars-based stuff. Yeah, honestly, the narrator hasn't even seen most of the Clone Wars, but even from the original films, he can remember a few moments where the goodies go from being surrendered to pulling a bunch of weapons and killing the enemy while they're surprised. Every scene with a flamethrower. Even the 2017 My Little Pony film is guilty of this. I was actually going to blame you for false information, but I just did a quick search that it was in fact banned in 1919, but I thought it was 1978 because that was when the US stopped using them. The very existence of flamethrowers proves that sometime, somewhere, someone said to themselves, "You know, I want to set those people over there on fire, but I'm just not close enough to get the job done," said by George Carlin in 1984. Where they dress up as soldiers of the evil empire and proceed to kill enemy soldiers who think that they're on their side. Looking at you, Star Wars. Although, to be fair, if the enemy I was facing had a planet-destroying laser, that would be a crime I'd happily commit. Every time they kill a minion. Nobody cares about the ninja army getting slaughtered, but the moment the big bad steps in the room, suddenly everyone has a conscience. Or they're storming the evil fortress, or business, or mansion, and some former veteran is just working security there to try and feed his family. He has no clue the boss is some supervillain bent on world domination or has kidnapped the protagonist's kid. Crap, the authorities don't even know. So from his perspective, there's just some armed psycho taking out his co-workers and friends, so he's doing his job, and now he's dead or permanently disabled, because the hero has to be a hero and not say anything about his family or the evil plot, and to not make any attempts to spare lives. Superheroes who destroy half the town before the villain even does anything. There was actually a Superman comic where he heard the news about a hurricane that destroyed houses because they weren't built to the standard, and that the government was going to build new houses for the displaced residents and ensure the new ones were up to code. So he flies off to a nearby poor district in town, told the residents to get out, and proceeded to destroy the entire district to ensure the government would build them new, better houses. Yes, that was an actual comic. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't care if they've got magical superpowers, a lot of the good guys are using child soldiers. Spider-Man's 15 in Homecoming. Attack on Titan has them all training at the same age, and they're fighting monsters well before they're 18. I think in Spider-Man's case, Tony realized, and that's why he sent Peter home. In Attack on Titan, it's literally life or death. In XCOM and XCOM 2, you commit some serious atrocities. Collateral damage in spades inside of cities, grenades and rockets going astray and killing civilians, acid, poison, and incendiaries are all utilized because screw the aliens pain, and the Reaper faction literally eats aliens. Plus you can go some dark directions in the lore if you want. This is all excused as, aliens never signed the Geneva Convention, so it's fine. Then you learn most of the aliens are basically either part human or forced into doing what they did. Yeah, that felt really blatant. Especially with the, "we'd never modify our soldiers like those insurgent people do, that's grotesque." You then go on to upgrade your soldiers with 6 times more upgrades than the enemy have, and basically take a soldier's head and put them onto a robot body. They kill all the bad guys, as in the soldiers and mercenaries and other goons working for the bad guy, but they can't kill the bad guy because he needs to be brought to justice. Oh, that's not a war crime, it's just kind of stupid, and it's a dumb trope of storytelling. Mostly anything the bad faction does that makes our blood boil. It's somehow okay for the heroes to torture them, kidnap their relatives and stuff. It's only wrong when the bad guys do it. The human brain is funny. There's an individual, let's call him A. Skywalker. No, that's too obvious. Let's call him Anakin S. His list is a little intense. Let's see if I can get everything. There's false surrendering, executing a surrendering foe, acting outside the rules of engagement, massacring an entire village including women and children, killing fleeing foes, fighting as a child soldier, using child soldiers, treason, and torture. Oh, don't forget he killed child soldiers too. They were just on his side. The guy from Taken does torture. Impersonating an enemy soldier. It's only a breach when you do it for the espionage or an offensive mission. It's not a war crime to impersonate an enemy or non-combatant, like Red Cross, UN, or Chaplain, to evade capture or escape as a prisoner of war. Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Due process of law, civil right violations, kidnapping, torture, and murder. But they deserve every bit of it, and we've loved Frank while he was committing these obvious crimes. He's more of an anti-hero, though. Even he himself doesn't say what he's doing is right, only necessary. There's an issue where he sees some cops putting Punisher stickers on their cars, and he tells them to knock it off because he's not the good guy. He tells them to emulate Captain America instead. I hate it when the main character hates killing, but then kills swaths of cronies working for the big bad, gets to said big bad, and refuses to kill them. I just killed 50 people, mostly security, but some were scientists, some could have been secretaries, IT people, whatever. But I can't kill you, because then I'll be just as bad as you. Generally in the film followed by, hey, he shot me, bang. Now I'm justified in killing him. There's a great post somewhere pointing out all the times Avatar Aang kills someone, only for him to have a crisis of conscience before fighting the planet-wide dictator who burned off his son's face for not wanting to sacrifice troops. The rebels killed a crap ton of people when they blew up the Death Stars. So many independent contractors who just took a guaranteed government gig. While the first one was complete, the second took an active role in an ongoing battle. There's no crimes here, they were active and hostile. If anything, the Empire committed a crime by getting into the battle with those contractors on board. Obviously not a movie, but I'd like to bring up Halo. Spartans are biologically and psychologically enhanced child soldiers that were made to squash rebellions. It's only by chance that they were invaded by the Covenant and began fighting them instead. And for those who aren't aware, basically they were kidnapped as children and replaced by clones that would die soon after due to complications that came up with the cloning process, as was the plan. The Halo universe at least recognizes how evil and messed up the Spartan program was. Typically, whenever a soldier or a civilian finds out the truth, they're disgusted by the entire program. To cover up their part, Oni blames everything on Halsey and she just takes the blame. But the lore doesn't hide the fact that Oni are the real boogeymen, and that they'd gladly do it again if they could maintain their version of order. Yeah, it's a weird bit of side lore that comes up all the way through the last few games, but never actually affects what you're doing. You're essentially on the side of the evil empire all through those games. It's just that you're temporarily fighting an evil theocracy and on a break from massacring small-time rebels. The best movies are the ones where you can understand the antagonist's side and the protagonist isn't perfect. The Jackie Chan movie The Foreigner did this right by displaying many different kinds of terror acts, but ends wrong because Jackie doesn't get his comeuppance. He did a whole bunch of bad stuff and got away for free because he had a sad story, I guess? Trying to stop the bad guy and destroying the entire city in the process. The premise of Captain America Civil War. In Red Dead 2, you can fake surrender to lawmen. The bloodiest shootout I had, I was trying to surrender. I don't know what happened. I gently bumped a guy with my horse by accident and a lawman saw me, so I got off and put my hands up like, sorry, I'll pay the fine or whatever. I never actually surrendered before, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was just standing there with my hands up, and the two cops kept saying, put your hands up, and then they just started blasting. It was a gosh darn bloodbath in the middle of the town. The bounty on me was ludicrous by the time I got out of there. Everything Jack Bauer did. That whole series is just a middle finger to the Geneva Convention. Battlefield, Call of Duty, or any other military game. Wanton destruction, buildings, infrastructure that isn't a direct target, using grenade launchers at close range, giving no quarter or aid to injured combatants, shooting humans directly with a 50 cal and larger weapons, flamethrowers, anything with a tripwire like claymores. Those are usually manually triggered, by the way. Video games and movies always get that wrong. Also, Taken, the first movie. Torture, murder, giving no quarter. This is really common in any media though. The good guys always executing injured enemies. Dressing as the enemy. Most movies. Try playing Spec Ops The Line if you want a game that's kind of self-aware about it. Oh boy. Also, it probably doesn't count as a war crime, but it definitely wouldn't be allowed. Captain America wearing a flag as a uniform. Flag code says the flag should not be used as bedding, drapery, or worn as clothing. Especially uniforms. Killing or finishing off injured enemies. That's kind of a grey area. If they're wounded in the middle of an active combat zone and still have weapons or equipment in hand, then you're probably good. Or if you're assaulting through an area, you can just put rounds into anything that would be a threat. If the fighting is done though, then yeah, you can't just shoot prisoners or the wounded. In Ace Combat Zero, you get points for destroying refugee tents. I'm looking at a lot of these other answers, and the one I haven't seen come up yet is mock execution. It's a hugely popular plot device to point a weapon at someone's head and pull the trigger when the chamber was empty, or to push someone off a roof onto a waiting platform or pad or whatever. but convincing someone that they or someone else is going to be killed imminently is a form of torture and thus a crime. Now that you know this, you'll see it everywhere. They're literally called the Dirty Dozen, and the way they dispose of those Third Reich people and their women, by pouring gasoline and grenades onto a bomb shelter, lived up to their name. But war crimes are usually only charged against the losers. It reminds me of what Defense Secretary Robert McNamara said of firebombing civilians in Tokyo in the documentary Fog of War, that they'd realized that if they'd lost the war, the bombing tactics they used would have definitely had them arrested for crimes. The Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. violate pretty much everyone's constitutional rights in a majority of the movies. The good in the Good, Bad, and the Ugly movie kills the most people over its runtime. Aragorn beheading the mouth of Sauron in the extended edition of The Return of the King. This is the King of Gondor beheading an unarmed messenger, something Tolkien specifically condemns as vile orc behavior earlier in the novel, and is then brought up again in the Mouth of Sauron chapter, when the Mouth of Sauron claims unassailability and Gandalf rejects it, saying, "The rules of war don't apply in Mordor," but then clarifies that obviously the men of Gondor are better than to murder an ambassador. And then Peter Jackson is like, "Hyuk!" Austin Powers crushed a guy with a steamroller, although that was more of an industrial accident than anything else. Brick killed a guy with a trident. Batman severely beats his victims, breaks bones, causes severe harm with gadgets, regardless of who he's fighting. Sure, the Joker deserves to lose teeth, but what about the random dealer? Does a desperate poor person selling substances to make ends meet in a brutal craphole city like Gotham deserve to be hospitalized? This is a huge theme of the Animorphs series. The main characters contemplate and even go through with mass murder on several occasions, as well as being literal child soldiers, and this isn't even going into the Andalites, who, while supposedly being on the good team, admit to using a virus to wipe out an entire planet to stop the villains from getting its resources. Have you seen Fury? Where do I frickin' begin? Killing prisoners? Looting? Attempted unspeakable act? Still one of the best movies I've seen. Also Band of Brothers. Spears is known for killing unarmed POWs. Jon Snow uses child soldiers against the White Walkers. Definitely not cool. I think in times of extreme urgency, using child soldiers isn't really a war crime. Like, just about everyone's gonna fight if not doing so means your death. It's why so many Soviets fought the Germans so viciously in World War II. It always bothered me that the British sieging a building full of Americans in the Patriot and burning it down with them inside was tremendously bad, but one would applaud William Wallace doing the same to a building full of British in Braveheart. My God, the top 20 answers are all either Saving Private Ryan or Star Wars The Clone Wars. What made you go from innocent bystander to full-blown aggressor? I lived with random roommates one summer in college. This one guy used to regularly wake up to his alarm, hit snooze, and then manage to leave for the day without ever turning the damn thing off. He always locked his door and it would just go off endlessly. I complained about it constantly, and he'd still never managed to turn it off. It woke me up an hour earlier than needed every single day, and it was driving me insane. Finally, one day he forgot to close his door, so I took the radio, disassembled it, removed the speaker, and then put it all back together and set the correct time. I think he missed a couple of quizzes because of it, but screw it, he deserved it. He finally got a new alarm which had a much shorter snooze timer, and it never happened again. It was awesome. This is my high school bully story. I was a big kid growing up, but a real softie. You could tell by looking at me that even though I was 5'11" and 210 pounds at the age of 12, that I wouldn't do anything. I got picked on a lot as a result. The smaller bullies got major props by making me tear up. One day, the kid who sat behind me in class had been flicking me in the back all day, and I finally asked the teacher to stop him. She said, and I still frickin' remember this at 25, "Are you going to cry now?" in the most disgusted-sounding voice an adult can level at a child. I was crushed by the adult figure responding in that way, and deeply shaken. 15 minutes later, my bully, having been affirmed by the teacher pretty much, decided he'd walk by me and break my pencil. I didn't go into a fit of rage or scream or shout. I started crying softly. I stood up and slowly walked to the bully. The teacher asked me why I was standing up, but I wasn't in a state to answer her. I lifted this kid, who weighed about half as much as me, up by the neck and testes and slowly walked, still crying, to the closed classroom window, knocking the teacher out of the way with one shoulder. I slammed this kid into the window 3 or 4 times before it broke off the hinges and then proceeded to shove him out the window. The crap storm that followed included my parents suing the school and the teacher and winning. The school kept video logs of every day of class via a camera setup. They had 200 days of me being bullied on camera, 40 reports from me and my parents that I was being bullied, and 0 response to any of that. Didn't even move my seat in the classroom. The teachers and principal became responsible when they take you under their protection. They legally are both responsible for the bully and letting them do what they're doing, and the safety of the child being bullied. It took about a month of court hearings to come to a settlement. This girl used to bully me in year 7 when we caught the bus home. She used to pull my hair and pinch me and steal my water bottle and drink it. Pushed to the edge, I filled said bottle with vinegar one night, and the next day she began her daily torment. She snatched my bottle and drank it, and then threw up. Minor victory. Wow. You know, after the first sip, you know that she'd know something was definitely up. She was really committed to the act to realize that this was not pH-neutral water and was in fact acidic vinegar and just commit to the whole damn bottle to spite you. That's a wrecked stomach to try and ensure that you finish your act of bullying. I know that she's the bad guy in this, but I kind of admire her dedication to the task. I was a mere witness to this story. A few years back, we got a very large snowfall. My neighbor decides to take his 2 small children, 5 and 2, out to build a snowman. The kids were so proud of it, they couldn't wait to show anyone walking down the street what they'd made. We woke up the next morning to see tire tracks through the neighbor's front yard going right through the newly flattened snowman. When the kids found out, they were very distressed and crying. So, being the awesome dad he was, he took them back out and rebuilt the snowman. Waking up the next morning, the same thing happened again. So this time, the guy and his kids built the snowman around this giant boulder that he had in his front yard as part of his landscaping. About 2 a.m., I heard a loud crash and looked out of my window to see a truck hobbling down the road with smoke coming out of it. Needless to say, the kids weren't as upset about their snowman the next day. We never did find out who it was. I remember in college I was walking down a sidewalk and some kid on a bicycle rode by me and spit on me. As he rode off and laughed to himself, he neglected to listen to me throw down my book bag and take off after him. At the time, I could run a 1 minute 58 half miles, so I doubt he could have escaped even if he'd seen me chasing him. I caught him within just a few seconds, pulled him off his bike, and told him if he didn't wipe it off and apologize, I was going to throw him into traffic. We were right next to a busy road. He was pretty shaken up, and I doubt he'll ever do that again. I'd always help my family, friends, neighbors, and anyone they knew with anything without asking for anything in return. We're talking childcare, computer problems, house repairs, stuff like that. I lived with an older woman out in San Francisco in an old Victorian for 4 months. Since I arrived, I fixed and replaced quite a few things around the place. Plumbing, faucets, hose, heaters, couch, toilet seat, washing machine, a few other things. About a week before I left, she wanted me to build her a bookshelf. I told her I'd do it if I received compensation. She got angry, saying that it's just a bookshelf and that I can build it no problem. She failed to notice that she doesn't have the equipment to build it, and I'd probably have to rent the tools. And I told her that if she just wants one, to just buy it, and that I'd help her put it together then. She got even angrier and said, "I give you a place to stay and you won't even help me build a shelf." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I screamed, "I pay to live here. I pay for my stay, my food, and whatever else I use while here. You could have spent money hiring someone to fix everything that I did in this place. I bet the cost in repairs would be way more than what I pay per month living here." So, a week later, her still angry at me, I left without paying last month's rent. There was a kid in my math class that would sit and tout his superiority over me and tell me how much better he is than me in every facet of life. I sat there in class for a good 3 months enduring this. I never replied except to ask him to please go away, or can you leave me alone? I'm trying to listen and work. I even asked my teacher twice if I could move away, and she said no. Then one day, with him making fun of me, as usual, something inside of me finally snapped and I turned to him, with all of my pent-up rage swimming, and said, "Shut the frick up before I punch you in your goddamn smug face." He then gets up and says, "Come on, let's fight." I almost got up with him before the sweet Amish girl that I was friends with said, "Don't do it. Sit down now." I regained my composure for a minute and sat down. He sat down and said, "That's what I thought, B-word." I just calmly turned to my teacher and said, "Can I move, please?" She said no. I just turned around, gripped the kid's desk, and flipped it with him in it completely over, and turned back to the teacher and said, "How about now?" I'd never felt more satisfied and angry at the same time in my life. No one cared about the kid because they all knew what happened. A football player even came up to me and said, "I would have thrown the desk after flipping it." In short, after putting up with a kid's crap for 3 months and being polite to him, I finally snapped and flipped his desk and him on his head. At a summer camp in 2003, I saw a bunch of younger kids looking up adult flicks on the public computers. I told them to check out Tub Girl. I could hear them screaming as I walked away. So there's this wretched woman who owned a boutique next door from the restaurant where I work. One day she came into the pub and was her usual witchy, entitled self. She ordered a club sandwich with extra crispy bacon and an extra spicy Bloody Mary, since apparently her taste buds stopped working years ago. I go to the bar to get our Bloody Mary, I douse the ice in Tabasco sauce, and fill it up with vodka and our already spicy Bloody Mary mix. Then I add in a bit more Tabasco sauce just for myself, around a full ounce of Tabasco in a 10-ounce glass. To my surprise, she loved it. Grrr. It came time to send the sandwich order to the kitchen. I put her order in and added a custom modifier to the ticket. In my frustration, I wrote, "Set the bacon on fire and put the ashes on the sandwich." When her order was almost ready, the cook asked me if I was serious about it. I replied, well, she ordered a club with extra crispy bacon. He held up a spatula with 3 slivers of black, burnt meat that hardly looked like bacon at all. I chuckled, thinking he'd pulled a joke on me. At this point, I was like, screw it, that's what she asked for. He finished preparing the club. I brought it out to her ready and willing to take it back and have a new one made. She ate 3/4 of the club and took the rest home, and said on the way out that it was the best time she had been at this place. I tried as hard as I could to be the full-blown aggressor, and it didn't even work. I live in an apartment complex that has community laundry. People have been opening up dryers to check if there's laundry in them. It's so loud that you can't really hear if the dryer is going. I saw this girl open up 2 dryers which are full of wet clothes and just leave them turned off. After she finally finds an empty dryer, puts her clothes in it, turns it on and leaves, I set her settings to fluff, no heat, and the time to 10 minutes. There's nothing more irritating than coming back after 50 minutes to an hour and finding out you have to wait another cycle. Oh my god. People who do this are like a much more inconsiderate version of something that already makes the narrator furious. People leaving the gosh darn door open in general when they come in from the outside. Except in this case, you're inconveniencing people for up to an hour and disrupting their plans. Not to mention all the people in the queue for the dryer after those people. Well, here's another story of dryer-related vigilantism. This happened to me. I was using the dorm laundry a few years back in college. I was working on a paper, so I wasn't paying attention while my clothes ran. A girl came in, opened the dryer my clothes were in, took my wet clothes out while they were in the process of drying, put her clothes in and tells it to keep running. She did this to 3 dryers, 2 of which were mine. I noticed this only after she did it to the last one. She looked me right in the eye, laughed, and left. I moved my clothes into the new dryers. Yeah, there were still empty ones available. Those old dryers wouldn't stop the timer while the doors were open, so I opened the doors to the 3 that she was using. I still had a load going in one of my washers, so I was going to be stuck there for over another hour. When she came down for her clothes, she noticed that her clothes were still wet. She cursed and set them again, this time paying for it herself. She'd used my money to do the last load since she took my clothes out of it. I opened the doors again. While my last load was drying, she came down to fetch her clothes again and cursed that the dryers must be broken and switched to different ones. I opened those too. By the end, she must have wasted $5 and 2 hours. It was starting to get fun and I had nowhere else to be while working on that paper. She dropped out of college later that semester because she never went to her chemistry class. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work as a teller for a bank and a brand new customer was making a deposit for $50K, the first deposit ever into that account. So of course there's going to be a hold on the check. I've always been nice and I extend the offer to call on the check the next day and if it clears I'll manually release the hold. This guy was a jerk from the start. He got very defensive and demanded that there was no hold. I tried to explain I'll call on the item and I have a contact at the drawing bank, but he kept cutting me off. He then demanded I close his account. Instead of trying to talk him out of it, I didn't give a crap. One less rude customer is a win to me. So I said okay and closed his account out for him right then and there. The guy was so dumbfounded that I hadn't bent over backwards to try to convince him to keep it open. He ended up walking to my branch manager and started to complain about me. I shouted over, "Mister, you asked me to close your account, don't forget to mention that." I'm very lucky to have a branch manager that will always back up her employees. She asked the customer, "Did you ask him to close your account?" "Well, he was doing his job and did what you asked him to do." and then she just let him rant on since she wasn't going to give in. Finally, after he left, we all shared a laugh. I've been working at the bank long enough to have some pull when it comes to this kind of stuff. In short, I closed out a customer's account after he asked me to do so, and then he got upset for not fighting to keep his account. There was this guy who lived next to me in an apartment building, and every morning at 8:30 he'd leave his apartment to go to work. I worked till late, and would usually be asleep at this time. Every morning he'd ring my doorbell like 5 times and then go to work. I then proceed to get up and check the door, see there's no one there, and then I can't go back to sleep. He thought it was funny and that I didn't really care, but in all honesty, I really needed that sleep. So one day, I got up at 8:25, and when he came, before he knocked, I opened the door. I had a bullhorn waiting and shouted at the top of my lungs, "F off!" I honestly think he crapped his pants. He never did that again. Ha! As a psychopath's son, I'd like to apologize. My father, the psychopath, did the same thing to a lesbian couple that lived down the street from us. Every day, morning, noon, or night, he'd honk his car horn while passing their house. He thought it was hilarious. I always found it embarrassing and sad. It was our last night in Fiji, so we thought we'd treat ourselves and go out for a nice dinner. We went to a restaurant that would normally be way out of our price range, but screw it, it'll probably be our last family holiday. For the entire entree and main course, these 2 little frickin' wiener kids are running around screaming between tables, around the waiters, trying to get into back of house. The waiter asked their parents to keep them seated, to which the mum responded, "Don't tell me what to do." What happened next time they ran past our table? Well, my foot just happened to be in the way. The kid hit the floor and skidded like 2 meters. Everyone knew it was me, but no one said anything at the time, partly because my family was trying not to laugh. You know what? I still don't feel bad. The body shop ripped me off. They held my car hostage until I paid up. All of their locks came down with a case of superglue, and the EPA got a phone call about the leaking oil storage tank out back that I noticed when I was there. It's a parking lot now. Someone smashed the pumpkin I had on my front porch for Halloween. I was so mad that night, I took an old purse and took a dump in it. I then put it on the same step my pumpkin was on, then hid in my room and watched out the window. I don't know if it was the same kid that smashed my pumpkin that later tried to steal the purse, but the happiness I took from that moment of a kid reaching his hand into the purse while he was walking away to steal the money more than made up for the anger of a smashed pumpkin. When people around me start texting during movies, I lean over and very obviously read their texts. They then quickly put the phone away. You people are all bold in a way that I very much envy. I think the thought of a confrontation, even this direct, scares me to my very core. And yes, people who have their phones out in theaters are nightmares. I did the deed with the babysitter. I was in a marriage that was physically, mentally, and verbally just a hellhole. I was constantly accused of making the beast with 2 backs with the babysitter. For some reason, in my ex-wife's twisted mind, no matter how long I left the house for, as soon as I crossed the threshold of the front door, my manhood immediately went into the babysitter. Outside, moving cars around for 2 minutes? I'm railing the babysitter. Walk away from her in the grocery store? I'm receiving a down-under kiss from the babysitter. Leave the bedroom at night to go take a leak? Well, the only thing I was apparently leaking was my seed into said babysitter. If my ex-wife closed her eyes for 3 seconds and couldn't see me, I was having a blisteringly fast quickie with the babysitter. I consider myself a pretty honorable person. While I was battling for custody, our marriage was still considered legally binding, as the divorce wasn't finalized until custody was. I was busy trying to be an honorable person, while my ex-wife was pretty much getting busy with everyone I knew to spite me. Our custody battle lasted 3 years. I was a saint in those 3 years. Didn't enter into another relationship, didn't do the deed, quit drinking entirely, and focused completely on our daughter. As soon as I won custody and the paperwork was finished, one of my very first phone calls I made was to the babysitter. She had been 19 when she first started babysitting for us, and was 23 when everything was finalized. I was about 28. I called her, we went to the bar, and that night we had sweaty, angry, spiteful grudge whoopee. Our mutual hate for my ex-wife reared its head, and we used that energy to rail the ever-loving stupid out of each other. I was seriously concerned we were going to injure each other. That kind of bedroom fun. We didn't even try to hide it from my ex-wife because at this point we both disliked her. Not only had she constantly accused me of doing the no-pants dance with the babysitter, she had accused the babysitter of doing the same to me and physically attacked her at one point. We were grudge bumping. That was it, plain and simple. It only lasted about 2 months, 2 really great months filled with great whoopee. We knew from the beginning it was just spite procreation, and we eventually agreed to go our separate ways. Normally, I'm not a spiteful person. I don't do the deed outside of a relationship, but we'd just been accused of it so much that we were like, screw it, might as well. When I was in high school, my family had come over for Thanksgiving dinner, and my younger brother, by about 2 years, started to badmouth and talk back to everyone in a yelling manner. While always being prone to migraines, I was still the let's talk this out in a nice calm manner kind of guy. That night, however, I had a severe migraine and was getting highly annoyed by his yelling. After asking him to kindly stop and getting blown off in front of my entire family, I just swept him up and slammed him on the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him. I figured since I'd never done anything like that before, I'd get a slap on the wrist. Everyone just looked at me as though they couldn't believe their eyes. I then left and fell asleep, and the next morning everyone pretended it didn't happen. The end. A couple of months ago, there was a teenager sitting in front of me who kept pulling his phone out to check Facebook of all things during the movie. Every time his phone lit up, I started kicking the back of his seat. It took him surprisingly many rounds of kicking to make the connection between phone on and seat kicking, but eventually he gave up. I am a pretty big guy, but I'm very light on my feet. Whenever I go into a crowd, I'm very polite and can stop on a dime when people dart in front of me. I just got back from London, and this is a city where people give 0 Fs about anything, especially on the tube. Nobody waits for anyone to get off, they just shove their way in. I'd had enough. I started laying shoulders into people as I got off. An oblivious young woman of 5'2" and 115 pounds with her eyes glued to her iPhone did not stand a chance. Slightly taller Frenchmen cursed me. I'm sure what they were saying was brutal, but I couldn't understand. Perhaps my crowning achievement came at Harrods. I was walking in a straight line and going with the flow. 2 Asian women started to go upstream. One of them tried to squeeze in between me and a tea display. I wasn't yielding. She spun full circle and started yelling at me. However, she wasn't paying attention and walked straight into the tea display, which collapsed. I felt like I was in a video for Bittersweet Symphony. 15 years ago, I was in my first year of teaching the 7th grade, fresh out of college. I had a kid who'd been held back twice, so he was 15 years old in the 7th grade. He was massive, probably about 6'1" and 220 pounds. Had a bad reputation with the entire staff, so much so that I got warnings from other teachers about him. He and I had a decent rapport, although he never did much for the first semester in terms of homework or studying. About halfway through the year, for reasons I still don't know, he approached me and told me that his mum was sick with cancer, and that he knew he wasn't doing well in school, but he was so busy trying to take care of her at home that he had little time for his studies. He said he didn't want to be held back a third time, but he also had a reputation to uphold as the school's bad mother effer. He asked me not to tell any other students or staff. I made a deal with him to tutor him privately, find him some extra credit. Basically, I told him I'd pass him as long as he promised to give me as much effort and time as he could muster, given his circumstances at home. And he really obliged for the next 5 months. So that's the good guy part of my story out of the way. Fast forward to the last 3 weeks of school. I don't know what I ate for lunch that day, but I had to take the worst number 2 of my life. Being a first-year teacher, I didn't want to leave my class unattended, but I couldn't wait. I frantically tried to find someone in my hall to cover my class for a few minutes, but all the other teachers were busy and holding it wasn't an option. I made some lousy excuse about going to blow my nose, went to the student bathroom, took the quickest number 2 I can remember, and returned to class confident that nothing untowards had occurred. Well, I was wrong. Turns out in the 2.5 minutes I was gone, the kids were goofing around and some dumb idiot made an offhand comment to my aforementioned prodigy about doing the deed with his mum or something. In a story that was corroborated by about 15 7th graders, this kid calmly stood up, walked across the room, and slapped the crap talker so hard that it drove him to the ground. And what did I do? I said, "Oh, you guys must be messing with me," and went on about the rest of the class as if nothing had happened. I regret nothing. That kid's mum died a few years later, and I still get email updates from him once in a while. Turns out he decided to be an engineer and build bridges. What's the craziest text that was actually a wrong number? Uncle Dave found the pudding. I just responded, "Cool." I'm still not sure if it was a secret code used by a crime syndicate to confirm an assassination. Phone vibrating, pull out phone. My butt cheek is tapping out Morse code on the toilet seat from a random number. When I changed phone numbers back in 19, I got the old number of some guy in his 20s in the same city who, obviously lives his best life or something. For years after that, I got calls and texts from his friends and family looking for him. "Hey, we're going out tonight. You coming? We're meeting at a nightclub." "Oh, thanks, bro, but this isn't Ethan." "Oh, Who are you? A single mom in her late 30s. Well, you can come too. Thanks, that's nice of you, but I haven't been clubbing since like 2006. We'll pick you up if you break something. Come get crunk. It was hilarious. I got a video of my buddy cranking it in the bathroom. Didn't hear from him for hours afterwards when I responded, "What the frick?" Apparently his ex-girlfriend suspected him of cheating. Apparently they regularly exchanged undressed photos. Snuck his phone while he slept, and Mess sent the video to everyone in his contacts, including his mother. I guess not entirely an accident, but I think it still counts. A woman texted me apologizing for how bad the hookup was the night before. This was through several very long and very detailed texts. I got all the details that I never wanted. Here's all the bullet points that I remember. He drove 4 hours to meet. They were going to spend the weekend together. He was married, and she wanted to know if he still planned on leaving his wife, as she had already broke up with her boyfriend. She was really happy to finally get his real number, even though things didn't go according to plan. They'd been using an app or something up until she got my number. She was using older pictures. She doesn't have good hygiene. He threw up a bit while giving her a down-under kiss, and she left skid marks on the bed. She went home, and the plan was to try again the next day. I think this is when he gave her my phone number. She went to the hotel early to surprise him with her fresh hoo-ha, but didn't see his car. She thought he was getting breakfast and decided to wait. After a few hours, she tried calling to see if he's okay. I don't normally answer the phone if I'm not expecting a call and I don't recognize the number. I guess he also blocked her on whatever app they were using. That's when she texted apologizing and asking for a second chance. Oh, my ever-loving deity of choice. As I've said many times with this job, this was quite enough internet for one day. And as I've realized all those other times, this is the beginning of my recording day and there is so much more left to do. Edward Keel grant me strength. A selfie of a lady who just got her hair done. I said her hair looked very nice and she had the wrong number. I'm sure that's not the worst accidental photo to send. I got a similar one where they were asking which sidewalk paver looked the best, and I said, I like the first one, but I also don't know how it would look in your house because you have the wrong number. She amusingly replied back with a picture of her front sidewalk area in front of her house, so I confirmed my choice, but also told her that the shrub in front of the windows looked like privet and that she might want to replace it. No, Gina, she swallowed them all. I told her it's not lethal to eat that many fish pellets, but she'll probably get some bad gas. What an attention-seeking loser. My dad often gets random voicemails from a little kid trying to tattle on his friend. I think he thinks he's calling the friend's mum or something, and always sounds genuinely upset. It's both hilarious and a bit sad. My sister-in-law, who's like a BFF to me, accidentally sent me hot and spicy messages that were intended for my brother-in-law. My husbands are brothers. I still can't figure out all the emojis, and we laugh about it together to this day. I get a lot of WhatsApp messages from people asking to buy illegal substances. I've never sold or done these things, but every few weeks someone will message me asking for something. I'll message back and tell them they've got the wrong number, and they'll either straight away block me or they'll tell me to stop effing around. Sometimes they'll even phone me and then find it's the wrong number and then block me. They're really far away from me too, like the other side of the country. I assume there's some dealer out there who has a similar number to mine. Hey bro, can you call me for SEX? It wasn't accidentally sent, but the text came from my mother. My name is Brian, she calls me Bri, and she wanted to talk for a sec. 2 honest typos, but we still have a good laugh about it to this day. This exact text happened to my principal back when I was teaching. Principals have to inform higher admin when they're leaving the building, and he texted, I'm leaving the building for you-know-what, instead of for a sec. After sorting it out, he went to the admin building and said everyone giggled at him when he walked by. He told us this very sheepishly in a meeting, and it was hilarious. Had a woman repeatedly texting me, Stacy, I need to cancel my yoga class for tomorrow. Despite numerous replies telling her I'm not Stacy and she had the wrong number, she insisted she didn't, and that I needed to stop playing around and act professionally. So the next time she texted back, I told her, per the cancellation policy you agreed to, we don't allow cancellations within 48 hours of the class. And if you'd still like to cancel, you'll still be charged the cost of the session plus a $25 administrative fee. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. I didn't hear anything back for about 2 hours, and then I got another message. Sorry, guess I really did have the wrong number. Have a good day. A photo of somebody's license. The weird thing is, the last name on the license was the same as mine, but it wasn't someone I recognized. I have an uncommon last name. I've never met anyone else with it outside my family, so it was pretty strange. It's done. Act as usual from now on. The cops might be calling you. Did you answer? Thanks for the heads up. My next step was going to be acting super unnatural. I once got a text message that simply said, ham. Then about 4 days later, from the same number, I got another text, Atlantis. Nothing since then. A little disappointed that I failed that particular cipher, honestly. Got a text from some random gal talking about how she had a good time with me on a yacht, and I told her she had the wrong number, but she seemed to think I was joking. Eventually, she sent me a selfie to try and jog my memory, and I finally told her to check the number she was texting, and she instantly became apologetic and thanked me for being patient. Oh, this is a friend's story. In the parents-students WhatsApp group from his school, a mother sent a video of her having fun with herself, obviously intended for her husband. This was when the delete for everyone option wasn't available, so she begged for everyone to erase it. Obviously, most of the group didn't, so the poor kid was bullied by being forced to see a video a lot of times. They eventually moved to another city. You're a psychic vampire. Stay away from me. I really couldn't comply because it came from an unidentified number. My youngest sister had just graduated high school and was super excited to be living on her own at college. Well, she was so excited about her Christmas tree that she had put up in her apartment with her roommates and wanted to send me a pic. The message came through and it was a photo of my sister undressed from the waist up. I felt like my brain did a Control-Alt-Delete so bad that my wife actually took the phone out of my hand to see what was wrong. She immediately texted my sister, Kelly, wrong photo. My sister was mortified. For the next week, whenever my text alert would go off, I'd involuntarily say, Kelly's chest, like I had PTSD from the whole thing. I had to change my alert tone. I really liked that tone, too. My brother accidentally sent me a snap with text, which was meant to go to his girlfriend saying, don't tell me that you have a scat fetish. Matter of fact, don't even tell me that you go number 2. My heart would be broken. Ha ha ha. When I got my new cell number, the previous owner, Edward, never updated his social network. After so many conversations with his associates, I pretty much became Edward, as I started to learn about his life. I resisted ever being cruel or a jerk and just simply integrated into his social circle. I think the worst thing I did was ruin his chances on purchasing a couch off Craigslist, as the seller kept messaging me and I started to obsess over the framed horse photo in the background. She refused to throw in the horse, so I decided the couch wasn't worth it. Oh, and his church desperately needed me to step in to play piano. I sent a video of a cat smashing piano keys as a reply. No idea if he ever played or not. This went on for a year until one day it simply stopped. It was odd in a way, as I felt like I'd lost something, especially my relationship with John, who was an alcoholic. Look, I know it seems like you had good intentions by not breaking their illusions, but you really should have just alerted everyone that it was a wrong number the moment it started, for the sake of your own karma. Thank you for not doing that though, as this was hilarious. Every once in a while I'll get a wrong text from a woman looking for someone that isn't me. I tell them they have the wrong number, they then proceed to tell me that I sound like a nice guy and ask me how I'm doing. Sometimes I'll go along with it just to amuse myself. About 5 minutes later, I'm getting undressed pics of a girl that looks like an adult film star. I feel bad for people that actually fall for these kinds of things. One time I got a completely random text from a number that I didn't know that read, "Violets are blue, your blood is red. The window is open, I'm under your bed." I was at school at the time, but I had left the window open. I never did figure out where it came from, but I texted back, but there was never another response. Once home, there was nobody under the bed, but it was creepy as frick. Oh boy, in college I was texting this girl I was hooking up with, and was also texting a friend of mine about the same time. One of those situations you think, how could anyone ever make a mistake like that? But I accidentally sent my friend, "By the way, do you like it when I arrive inside you? Just wondering." And the screenshot of that will still be passed around long after I'm gone. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Had a guy send me a picture of his abs. I told him it was a wrong number. He wouldn't let up that I was the girl he'd met at the club the night before. I told him again and he wouldn't have it. So I proceeded to mess with him for the next 7 days while at work. For hours I talked dirty to this guy. He kept begging for a picture, told my coworkers and showed them the texts. Finally decided to give in and let him have it. Went to the bathroom, took off my clothes, took a selfie and sent. He was not ready for the heavily tattooed, bearded man giving him the Betty Boop pose. He did respond once more saying, "That's messed up. You could have told me it was the wrong number." I only responded once more asking when he was going to take me out. I never heard from him again. I had somebody's parole officer call me looking for them. They then called back and said I must know them because this is the number they gave. I've had that number for almost 10 years at that point. Sounds like someone never intended on showing up to that meeting with their PO. "Jackie, call me quick. Your dad, he just had an accident. Jackie, pick up the fricking phone." Some years ago, my best friend's wife, ex-wife now, not because of this, she'd been texting me about basketball. We both had daughters playing on the same team that she was coaching, and she was messaging him racy messages. I guess she got her conversations crossed and I got a grainy Motorola Razr picture of her spitting on her chest. I responded, "I appreciate the gesture, but I don't think you meant to send that to me." She apologized about 6,000 times and we swore to keep that little incident a secret. Got a text from a woman I'd just interviewed with while she was posing with a top with a chest window so large that she might as well have sent me a picture of herself undressed from the waist up because it would have saved time. But I needed that job, so I replied as a new hire should, stating that the photo made me uncomfortable and that if she could not send me such things in the future, it would be great. Turns out she was meant to be sending it to her brother. We both have the same first name, but now that raised further questions, but I dropped the subject like a stone and promised to delete the photo. It lives rent-free in my mind anyways. Not a text I received, but one that I sent. I told one of my friends that I love him and can't wait to see him. We should go out to a nice restaurant once I'm back in town. That was meant to be sent to my wife, but he and I had a good laugh about it. I got this one yesterday. "Hello, Steve. Can we go to an orphanage next week?" I'm obviously not Steve, but I almost responded because I wanted to know what kind of person would ask a question like that. You should have asked, "Depends, are we dropping off or picking up?" I accidentally sent pictures of a crawl space to someone. Some random on WhatsApp sent me undressed photos. I told her she sent it to the wrong person and she argued with me about it. Like, you messed up, take the L. Random number sent me a text. "So, you're sick?" I answer, "Who is this?" "Murphmeister." It's not weird as much random and funny, I guess. I accidentally sent one to my boss that was for my fiancé, calling my coworkers lazy, and he texted back and agreed with me. I got multiple texts over a couple of weeks asking me about the car I was selling. Most of them were in Spanish. I wasn't selling a car. Some guy in New York City was, and he apparently got the number wrong. Finally, I just straight up asked one of the people to please go knock on his door and ask him to fix his sign. I got an apology text from the car seller later in broken English. I hope he managed to sell it. I was doing Shipt, which is like Instacart, and I texted the lady that I was shopping for to tell her the store didn't have something she ordered, and she replied, "You're right, showering together does save water, winky face." And then a few minutes later, "Sorry, yes, that substitute is fine." Not exactly a text, but close. I don't usually answer unknown phone number calls. A number called me 4 times in a row and I answered the last one. An emergency worker of some sort scolded me for not answering sooner. I explained to her that she called the wrong person. Realization set in and she apologized. I hope whoever she was trying to reach is all right. Not a text, but I recently received a postcard in the mail that was addressed to Zac Efron. My brother was dating, and is currently married to, a woman with the same name as me. He went away to college and we constantly texted and sent videos to each other. Well, one day I got a video that was all, "I miss you so much, can't wait to see you," and I was like, "Aw, sweet." Then it becomes, "I can't wait to hold you in my arms again and kiss your lips," and I was immediately like, "No, no, no," before I realized what had happened. He had changed my name to Sister after that. I got a group text once saying in all caps, "Stay away from my daughter." I'm a little intrigued by the nature of the group chat here. Was it full of family and friends of the daughter to presumably help in scaring a potential suitor away? Or was this a group of every eligible male the parent in question thought might be taking an interest in the daughter? Whew. The text said, "Happy birthday," from an unknown number. I replied, "It's not my birthday," and they replied with, "It's my phone, I'll text whatever I want." "I just don't know what to do, Mom. I just got off the phone with him and it makes me feel like I'm on fire or something. I just like him so much." Sent to me by a girl I just got off the phone with. Someone asked me if they could borrow $20 to buy green herb. I told them they could absolutely do that. No clue who that was. I woke up to a text that said, "Interracial beatdown." I don't know if I was supposed to be the white guy, but I was sleeping. About 8 messages in a row explaining some complex scientific theory in the middle of the night. I texted back when I woke up, "Sorry, wrong number, but thanks for the lesson." I got a text from a number that I didn't know. "How much is your famous beef jerky?" I thought this was a little weird since I do make good beef jerky, thanks Excalibur Dehydrator, but I've never ever sold it. I'm sitting there at the bar puzzling it out, but then I get another text from another number asking about it. And another. Pretty soon my phone is buzzing non-stop about people raving about or wanting to buy my beef jerky. Turns out it was a practical joke from my wife. She was part of a lady Facebook group with tons of members and asked them all to text me about beef jerky for April Fools. Funny now, but my friend and I were at the bar frantically Googling to figure out if someone had posted in Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and used my number. I had people trying to sell substance, wishing a happy birthday to multiple people that weren't me, asking me if I could pick up their kids from practice, asking if I'm going to make the meeting, asking for notes from the meeting last week, telling me they're going to be late to work in the morning, goes in waves every 4 to 6 months. So many people. I've had my number for 15 years and I can't even count the number of wrong calls and texts I've received. Female voice message. "Hey Tony," not my name. "I don't know why you're avoiding my messages, but I'm going to go ahead with a termination at the clinic. I know it's what you want. Can you call me? It's in 2 days' time. XXX Sparkles." I never replied. Sorry, Sparkles. Really sad one. Someone texted me at 11 p.m. looking for an emergency lawyer to halt a deportation. They followed up with a phone call 5 minutes later, crying and pleading. I had to say that they had the wrong number and that I couldn't help. They didn't take that well. I never found out what happened. An adult movie featuring Shrek. Back when I didn't have a phone that could view images, I had to use a PC to get into my account and download what was sent. I got 3 illustrated messages of Shrek characters doing the deed. Eventually, I got a call from the number, and as soon as I answered, he knew I wasn't who he was expecting. I asked if he was the one sending the Shrek prawn, and he just said, "Sorry," before hanging up. Never got any more from him. My brother accidentally sent me a video of him getting dome by some broad in his truck. Not a text, but I got multiple voicemails looking for Booty Man. My close friends now call me Booty Man. It was my birthday about 6 years ago. I got a text from an unknown number wishing me a happy birthday. Of course, I thank them and ask who they are since I don't have their number saved. They sent me some random name that I absolutely didn't know. Turns out it was also their aunt's birthday as well. They just entered the wrong number and happened to wish me happy birthday on the correct day. "Don't forget our deal. If you do, I'll kick your butt." I left it on red. My butt remains unkicked. Where are you at, bro? Will somebody please turn the gosh diddly darn server back on? It was the accidental text that reignited a friendship that had become dormant for about 5 years. That was 15 years ago, and we're closer than ever now. I was asked if I wanted to go shopping, but they called me the wrong name. I politely replied that they had the wrong number, but they refused to believe me, so I eventually just blocked them on my phone. I was hoping this would end with, eventually I went shopping with them. The money's in the glove box. Where is that car? My sister and I went to the same university. I'd gone home for the weekend and our mum gave me Sloppy Joe sandwiches to bring back up to my sister at school. I drove to my sister's building and was sitting in the parking lot. I was calling her and texting her and she wasn't answering. I was getting aggravated because I had somewhere to be. I had her roommate's number and texted her and said, "Hey, are you home?" My next text to her was going to be, "Can I give you this food for my sister to throw in your fridge?" But my sister messaged me back while typing. I then typed out, "I have some Sloppy Joes for you, B-word." But I inadvertently sent that to my sister's roommate, who I barely knew, instead of sending it to my sister. So I'm answering for my sister's roommate. "I have some Sloppy Joes for you, you little B-word." Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. To be fair, it was accidentally sent to everyone in Hawaii. "Mom, where are you?" From some girl in the Philippines. Just wrong phone prefix, probably. I questioned whether I should respond, "I'm not your mum, but I can be your daddy," but I felt that was inappropriate. Might have gotten a funny conversation, though. Someone from Florida that was very happy that the Queen died. I didn't even know Florida had a queen. What has been the best corporate Darwin Award? As in, how did they kill their own business? I own a vineyard and was looking for numbered tags to attach to the post at the end of each row. One website that sold such items said, "Don't use cheap cattle ear tags to mark your rows," and proceeded to describe how much better their tags were. I thought, Cheap cattle ear tags, of course, and promptly found and purchased them at a fraction of the cost. I would never have thought of it if not for this great marketing. I officially nominate Schlitz beer for the Corporate Darwin Hall of Fame. #1 beer in America by far in the late 60s and early 70s, when some genius at the head office decided to change the recipe to save money on ingredients. Sales fell off a cliff. Almost immediately they changed back to the old recipe, but it was already too late. The old Schlitz drinkers stayed away in droves. The company remains up Schlitz Creek without a paddle. We actually had Schlitz as a case study in business school. Management went through no less than 10 successive rounds of cost-cutting, incrementally decreasing product quality with each round. The last cost-cutting was the death knell. They stopped filtering out the last little yeast flakes from the final product, figuring that consumers wouldn't mind little flecks of yeast in the head of their beer. Lesson learned. Consumers typically don't notice the drop in quality going from A to B, but definitely notice the drop from A to J. Prodigy Online Service. They had a great message board system which was included in the monthly rate. They got greedy and for no reason other than wanting to make more money, started charging people to use the board per message. It was beyond idiotic, and at the time, so many of us users were like, okay, we're done with Prodigy then. Within 1 year, they lost almost complete market share to CompuServe and AOL, and were all but non-existent shortly after. All because they got extra greedy. The Osborne Effect. The Osborne 1 was the first commercially successful PC. The founder pre-announced the successor to the Osborne 1 way before it was ready to come to the market. His announcement, touting how good the next machine would be, killed demand for the Osborne 1. The company then ran out of money and couldn't bring the successor to market, declared bankruptcy, and died. You know, as much as it makes sense that announcing your product will be obsolete in a few years isn't a great business idea, I do kind of prefer the honesty to the Steve Jobs method of announcing literally every product as the greatest of its kind for all eternity, only to immediately drop the pretense after the new product comes out. Whoever was in charge of getting the yellow pages online. Multi-billion-dollar industry that adopted way too late. Segway. I know this company still technically exists, but bear with me. I remember before the Segway was unveiled, it was billed by its creator, Dean Kamen, as a product that would revolutionize the way cities are being built. This quote still sticks in my head after all these years. It was also quoted as being a big deal, as big as the PC, and possibly more important than the internet. But the product and company would prove to be a major disaster. The Segway debuted in November 2002 on Amazon for $5,000. In June 2003, President Bush made headlines for falling off a Segway during a test drive. This event alone probably killed the future of the company. Then in September 2003, the company recalled all units due to injuries sustained by customers when the battery died. Fast forward to 2009, Segway was acquired by UK businessman James Heselden. In a literal Darwin Award moment, Heselden dies when he rides his Segway over a 30-foot cliff and falls into the river below. Today, as we know, the Segway lives on in a world of underachievement, the fodder of mall cops and tourism packages, not revolutionizing anything. It did, however, appear on an episode of Duck Dynasty. Oldsmobile, with the "It's not your father's Oldsmobile" ad slogan. The kids didn't want it, and the old folks thought that it changed. They never recovered from the loss. Hull & Clark. They print Avon catalogs, checks, Scantron forms, stuff like that. Their business was dying because they leveraged everything on check printing. They do something like 98% of checks in the US. If you have a checkbook, I bet $10 it's a Hull & Clark check. So anyway, they spun up a company called Fidipudi, a $100 million investment. Super custom stationery printing. They organized call centers, set up 100-line VoIP systems in anticipation of the millions of orders they were going to get, dozens of graphic artists recruited, and nobody bothered to tell them that the advertising platform they'd already blown $40 million on, 1, didn't work, and 2, targeted an audience that had very little interest in old-school stationery or even one-off custom cards. Their advertising platform chosen? Facebook. Total orders taken? 13. Also, that name, Fidipudi. Phidippides was the Athenian herald who ran the 25 miles from the battlefield near Marathon to Athens to announce the Greek victory over Persia in the Battle of Marathon, only for then to immediately collapse and die. It's kind of fitting. This really was one of amazing stupidity. It was the late 1990s, the middle of the tech boom, in San Diego, one of the hearts of said tech boom. A small consulting company had about 100 programmers contracted out to about a dozen companies. The profits were huge. The company charged $200 an hour per person, paid the employee about $70 an hour, and pocketed the rest. The only overhead was a small main office, a recruiter, an HR person, and an accountant to handle all that money and small expenses. Then the company scored big. Microsoft HQ in Seattle wanted some of these people, contracting about a dozen of them to start. The profits were so massive, the programmers were flown back to San Diego each weekend. The deal was still per hour, and Microsoft loved the people and asked them to work through weekends, saving the company the cost of airfare and bringing in a couple of extra million. So, 2 months later, expense reports are getting kicked back. The company was refusing to pay large parking fees for people who worked 7 days a week for 3 to 4 weeks. The company accountant said they should have taken a cab to the airport since they were gone for 3 weeks. After reminding the accountants they hadn't intended to stay that long, that they did so at the company request, they were still refused reimbursement on parking. 5 of these contractors resigned due to the parking payment issue, and others slowly followed. The Microsoft deal collapsed because they kept losing people, and within the year the whole company folded. Yes, this company folded during the tech boom in a boom city. Hundreds of millions of dollars lost because they wanted to screw over their most income-producing employees over maybe $2,000 in parking fees. I'm very much into finance, so I've got an interesting one. In 2008, speculators were driving the price of oil to unsustainable levels. Even back when the economy was healthy, those prices made no economic sense at all. Enter SemGroup, a pipeline company that moved oil and traded energy futures on the side. In 2008, they decided to go short on oil. That's to say, they bet that oil prices would go down. For the month or two that followed, oil kept pushing higher and higher, and they kept averaging up their position. The problem here was, SemGroup's management was so certain that oil prices would fall, they shorted oil on margin, meaning they started borrowing money from their broker to short oil more. Eventually, the clearinghouses of the brokerage with whom SemGroup assumed this large short position decided that this was too much. SemGroup's losing too much money and they might go bankrupt, because SemGroup owed them money on margin, and there's a risk that they'll lose that money. So they, the clearinghouse, forced SemGroup to unwind their entire position to Barclays. SemGroup eventually went bankrupt. Literally 1 week later, oil crashed spectacularly. Over a month or so, it fell nearly 80%. SemGroup missed out on a $5 billion profit. This was written in 2014. Groupon isn't dead yet, but Google offered to buy them, then a 2-year-old local e-commerce startup, for $5.75 billion in the fall of 2010. Groupon didn't accept the offer, and now there are countless Groupon alternatives. When someone offers you $6 billion for something you just made, I say you accept it. Take the money and invent something else. Gerald Ratner called his own product total crap and inadvertently wiped out $500 billion from the company's value. He compounded this by going on to remark that some of the earrings were cheaper than a Marks & Spencer's prawn sandwich, but probably wouldn't last as long. Dumb move, but the guy had a great sense of humor. Even better is the Ratner effect. I love that it has a name. The narrator finds this name even funnier given that Brett Ratner is just kind of a byword for bad filmmaking as well. And, less humorously, several misconduct accusations from many different women. Seems more deserving of the career crash than Gerald Ratner. Netflix came really close before they wised up and shelved Quickster. In the 2010s, they announced they were dividing its services into 2 different companies. All of the instant streaming would be handled by Netflix, while the physical DVDs would be under a new service called Quickster. It was universally hated by the internet as a whole, because back then about 12 million users had joint streaming and DVD packages. The change basically forced them to reconfigure their Netflix subscription to streaming only, and then sign up for a Quickster account to get the DVDs. It basically required 2 accounts for users to get what they were previously getting from 1 account. The Quickster idea was cancelled within a month. Fun fact about that too is that the Quickster handle was already owned by some random high schooler who would exclusively tweet about smoking green herb and doing the deed with his girlfriend, so when people looked up Quickster on Twitter, that was the first thing they'd find. I trot this story out anytime there's a discussion about business stupidity. This wasn't a big corporation, just a small business, but the principle applies. When I was growing up, there was a hardware store in my town owned by a crusty old guy. The aisles were 2 feet wide and the light bulbs were only 40 watts. "It saves electricity," the owner would say if someone complained. The shelves were lined with small, worn cardboard boxes of nails, nuts, screws, bolts, and washers, Practically every connector or fastener available. Every size, shape, threading, and composition. Did you need a zinc alloy washer 2 inches in diameter with a 2mm hole? Or a reverse-threaded, hex-headed brass machine bolt? Or a lock nuts for the tailpipe bracket of a 1977 Oldsmobile? This old guy had it. When I was about 20, he passed away and his wife hired a business manager. He installed new lighting, widened the aisles, eliminated the inventory that didn't sell well, which was about 90% of it. The store was stocked with the most popular fasteners and related hardware. It looked nicer, it smelled nicer, it had most of what everyone needed. And it was out of business in less than a year. Most of what the old guy sold sat on shelves for years. I remember one box from the 1940s that was still half full of bolts. 99% of it you'd never need. But if you needed any fastener, you went to his place first because you knew he had it. Once the place was the same as any other hardware store, people quit driving across town to pay slightly more for guaranteed selection. Using Android is like peeing your pants for warmth in winter, said by Nokia September 21, 2010. We love rice here in the Philippines. There's a popular and relatively cheap Japanese restaurant here that served unlimited rice for every meal, and it was very known for it. Some brilliant guy decides to take out the unlimited rice and word gets around and people stop going. A few months later, they decided to put the promo back, but the customers had just stopped coming by that point. To all the Filipinos wondering, you're right, it's Tokyo, Tokyo. That would be like Olive Garden deciding that breadsticks are no longer unlimited. I'd never go back. Schwinn ignoring the super small niche market of mountain bikes, leaving it to little specialty shops like Trek. Way to blow a 30-year lead, brainiacs. Borders ceasing business operations with Amazon. Buy MySpace for $580 million and then scare away users with ads intended to generate profit. Users leave MySpace and join Facebook. Sell MySpace for $38 million. Ouch. Try Bebo, brought for $850 million and the original owners bought it back for $1 million. Circuit City making the decision to no longer sell appliances. No matter how bad the economy is, people will still buy refrigerators, washers, vacuums and stuff, but they'll wait on TVs and video games. Selling off CarMax was pretty stupid too. And speaking of Circuit City, laying off the higher paid employees and keeping all the lower paid ones, apparently never connecting the dots on a level of product knowledge equaling a level of compensation. I remember going into a Circuit City just as the nosedive began, and a young man telling me outright that all the good people were let go. He wasn't being rude or apathetic, just being honest. I hope he landed on his feet. Good guy. Fred Goodwin of Royal Bank of Scotland, or RBS. Probably has to be up there somewhere, right? Turned RBS into the largest company in the world by buying a lot of other companies. These companies didn't do well, the bank collapsed spectacularly, and the government had to buy 73% of it to stop it from folding completely. Fred the Shred lost his job and his knighthood and was forced into retirement. When he joined the company, shares were 442p, and when he left they were worth 65p. They also posted the biggest loss in UK history, 24 billion. Damn, I didn't realize you could lose a knighthood. That's one hell of a screw-up. Yes, only 7 people have ever had them taken away, and only one before 1979. And that guy was strung up on a gallows for treason. Only the monarch has the authority to take knighthoods away. The current process has a special committee of parliament that recommends people to the Queen that should have them taken away. You basically have to be convicted of a serious crime or bring the profession you were knighted for into total disrepute, as in Fred's case. Dig. That irreversible system upgrade. It's like a pretty version of Reddit, but without subreddits. Then they changed it so users couldn't really submit content anymore. And the only postings came from the RSS feeds of major news outlets. It's still around in that form, but almost nobody uses it. I hated Reddit at the time, mostly for its aesthetics, but this forced me over and I haven't regretted it. I worked on the TV show Fear Factor. Pretty sure making 2 hot blonde girls drink donkey splooge killed the show. It was cancelled after the controversy of that episode. Western Union rejected the telephone in 1876. This year, Powder, the group that ran Park City Mountain Resort, the number 3 family ski resort in the country, got absorbed by Vail, its competition, and removed from ownership of its resort. Why? Because after 20 years of having the greatest lease in history, about $150,000 a year for a resort that grosses millions and millions, the end of the lease time rolled around, and they forgot to renew it. Literally, that's it. Someone didn't take down a note and they turned in their paperwork 3 days late, got sued, and lost everything. Do your paperwork, folks. Radio Shack's decision to move away from hobbyists and general electronics to becoming a cell phone store. Because why be the best dork store when you could be the crappiest Best Buy? Sadly, it might have gone that way anyway, with the slow ongoing death of most brick-and-mortar stores. But even though I'm not sure Radio Shack could have been saved either way, seeing a store overgeneralize and lose all of its character is probably a good sign when you're an employee that the end is nigh. The Peanut Corporation of America. They found salmonella in their products. The owner covered it up and told them to just ship it. Infected and killed scores of people, the company went bankrupt almost immediately after it was traced back to them, and the owners were charged and prosecuted. The Milwaukee Road is one of my favorites. They abandoned half of their main line because they thought it was losing money despite having heavy traffic. Several years after they'd torn up the line, they realized there had been an accounting error, and that was actually the only part of the system that was making money. They sold off some of their rolling stock to generate some short-term cash and then leased it back. When the lease price increased, they couldn't afford to repair their own equipment, so they sold off more to the leasers. Rinse and repeat. Instead of completing their electrification and buying new electric locomotives, which GE was willing to give them a deal on, they decided to remove the electrification and sell it for scrap. When they did this, scrap prices fell, and it ended up being more expensive to dieselize than it would have been to finish their electrification. Needless to say, things did not go well for them. Breyer's ice cream was the brand with simple ingredients listed on the back and built a name bragging about how real they were. You might remember the commercials of little kids reading milk, sugar, vanilla back in the 90s. When they got bought out by Unilever, the ingredients now are so artificial they can't legally be known as ice cream anymore and is called frozen dairy dessert. Consumers confused why their favorite flavor doesn't melt and has the consistency of marshmallow have complained on the brand's social media accounts. Here's a sad one. Malden Mills, the original producer of the polar fleece material. CEO Aaron Fauerstein decided not to patent it, which made it an open-source textile able to be produced cheaply and widely. This wasn't the decision that killed the business, though. In 1995, Malden Mills burned down. At a time when manufacturers were relocating their operations overseas to cut costs, Fauerstein rebuilt the factory at the same location, and he continued to pay the salaries and benefits of all his employees during the rebuilding. Said Fauerstein, "I have a responsibility to the worker, both blue-collar and white-collar. I have an equal responsibility to the community. It would have been unconscionable to put 3,000 people on the streets and deliver a death blow to the cities of Lawrence and Methuen. Maybe on paper our company is worthless to Wall Street, but I can tell you it's worth far more." Sadly, the company never recovered. Fauerstein was eventually ousted, Malden Mills declared bankruptcy, and its assets were sold off or spun off to new companies. If we're going with recent, Eddie Lampert, the CEO of Sears, is one of the best contenders for the Corporate Darwin Award. He's an Ayn Rand-loving, free-market ideologist who attempted to take his non-reality-based style of life out of the lobbyist and Congress-rigged world of hedge funds and into retail. He laid off, cut, and trimmed back everything he could, and forced departments, managers, and employees to fight each other for resources, and pay under the delusion that the company would benefit from a survival-of-the-fittest atmosphere. Since that time, Sears lost half its value in 5 years and closed more than half of its stores, not to mention just about destroyed one of the oldest and most trusted brands in the history of the United States. Kodak telling the creator of digital photography to go F himself. This goes much deeper than anyone knows. My father was on the cutting edge of Kodak, working in research and development. There are literally so many times Kodak sold off patents on products that were ridiculously expensive to produce. My favorite example? Remember when CD players were ridiculously expensive? It was because the lens cost a ton to produce. You remember when the price dropped? Yeah, Kodak sold the patent to Sony for $50,000. There was an employee who worked at Kodak who developed this specialized process. For doing something, I can't remember exactly what. Kodak didn't want it, sold that employee the patent for $10,000. He's a millionaire now. It annoys me because it was basically the nail in the coffin for Rochester, New York, and as a side effect, the whole region. Our biggest employer now? A hospital and a grocery store. Thanks a ton, Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb. Blockbuster not buying Netflix for $50 million. Netflix is now worth $406 billion in 2025. Blockbuster has a one-season show on Netflix starring Randall Park? There's a restaurant in Austin that has really great chicken wings. At one point a few years back, the wings were taken off the menu because they were too popular and slowing down the kitchen. That lasted about a month before someone realized it was a better idea to put some time and effort into improving the kitchen rather than kill off their best-selling item. Enron for paying their executives IDEA bonuses before the ideas turned a profit. They paid one guy millions for inventing an online movie downloading service about 10 years before it was feasible. Ironically, the documentary is available on Netflix. It didn't kill the company, but Fox inadvertently handed George Lucas a multi-billion-dollar merchandising empire to save a measly $20,000 on his Star Wars salary. The Sci-Fi Channel changing the spelling of their name to SYFY, removing the word channel and replacing their good shows like Battlestar with crappy reality TV. They're lucky they still exist at all. Motorola thinking smartphones wouldn't catch on. I hope in the future it's Comcast for not investing in decent internet or customer service. I audited an air cargo company, and essentially a member of the legal department had shifted the terms and conditions on their lease contracts. Basically, they rearranged the terms, and in the process of copy-pasting the information, they unintentionally cut the part out which pushed all of the normal flying expenses back onto the client. Fuel, landing fees, all of the stuff a normal air cargo contract would come with. The contract was for their biggest client, and for a while the client signed the papers and paid as they normally had, until the client got all new management. The new management at the client reviewed all contract terms and found they no longer had to pay these expenses they previously had to. So they didn't, for 2 years. When the company I audited found receivables aged greater than 2 years, they began to flip out and demand payment. The customer basically said, "We have no obligation to pay, so we're not." The company I audited went back to the agreement where they pretty much said, "Oh, the receivable was not collectible," so they wrote it off, forcing them to take an enormous hit on their income statement, which in turn caused them to break a debt covenant, and all their long-term debt became current. Boom. Dead in the water, all due to a copy and paste error. In short, company went bankrupt because lawyers can't copy-paste. Kmart took out a whole bunch of debt to buy back their shares, looking to raise their share price. When news of this came out, Walmart, which had basically no debt at the time, decided it would be a good time to start a price war. Kmart had to pay off interest, whereas Walmart had little to no interest payments to make. So, by lowering the profit margin to a point where Kmart had to cut back on their internal investment, Walmart surged ahead while Kmart lagged behind. The biggest cut Kmart made, I believe, was CAPEX, or capital expenditures, things like making new stores and upkeeping current ones. And that's a major reason why Walmart is so popular and booming, whereas Kmart has always seemed just a little bit off. General Motors decided to make as many cars as possible using the same model and only changing the brand. Too many models and not enough quality were all being sold to the same tier of consumer. They hoped for regional loyalty at best and killed their own company. It didn't kill the business, but Xerox basically gave away the concepts behind the modern PC to Apple. What happened that made you go from stable relationship to, "Oh, I need a restraining order"? We were actually engaged to be married. Then she went on holidays without me and came back pregnant. She then told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really love me. Accept this baby and help me raise it to prove it." I declined and asked her to leave the home that I paid for and that was in my name. She refused, so I made arrangements, cancelled my lease, then left and told her there were 4 days left on the lease, I think. She wailed, "But what am I supposed to do? I don't have a job!" After the constant mental beatdown from her, I started suffering from ED at 22 years of age. Eventually, I mustered the courage to leave her. She quickly moved on to someone else who had later become her husband, and called me every week to basically rub it in, saying how much better he was than me, how much bigger he was than me, all that stuff. So I moved out of state, changed my number, never heard from her again. She called my parents and even showed up at their home, but they told her to go away. About 10 years later, my friend ran into an old friend of hers. Apparently, she had been arrested for attacking her own mother, got out of jail, attacked her husband, tried to take her kids from him, was arrested again, and later released. I guess I dodged a huge bullet there. Mine cheated on me the day my dad died. He sliced himself in front of me and then threatened to kill my cat. I was young, dumb, and thought that I was in love and ignored many red flags. As he got more comfortable around me, he let his crazy out. Someone stole his cell phone and he asked me to purchase a shotty for him so that he could go and shoot the person who did it. It took me another year and a half to leave. I did try breaking up with him, but he told me that if I ever left, he'd kill everyone I love and then self-delete so I'd know what it was like to be truly alone. That relationship ended up with an order of police protection. He was nuts. We met online, we both had video games in common, and we hit it right off. Fast forward 2 years and we got engaged. All was well, until he started getting violent toward me and our pets. I felt stuck because I couldn't afford to live on my own. Then he went on a business trip and I found a bunch of truly reprehensible adult films containing illegal subject matter hidden on a flash drive. Turned it in, he got arrested. Turns out he was also hiring working girls and stuff. He's in prison now and it's illegal for him to contact me. Oh boy, kinda thought a lot more of these stories would be exaggeration and the restraining orders would be wishful thinking. Turns out we have a bunch of legitimate domestic criminals lined up. Yay! I graduated, she wanted to transfer schools, so we moved to a college town where she told me she had been accepted as a transfer. Turns out the transfer hadn't been accepted, and when she reapplied, that wasn't accepted either. She got a job at Walmart while trying to figure out her next move. After about 2 months, she decided we should move to Pittsburgh. She's convinced this will solve all her problems and make her happy. Except we're in a recession and I just got my first good job. I don't want to move. She became very aggressive. I didn't want to go home. She was constantly negative and on the edge of a screaming fight. I was just avoiding her at the end. We were together 4 years before that, and she was always moody but never prone to these violent outbursts. 6 months of that, she went home to her hometown to take a semester at a local school and stay with her parents. I called her 2 weeks later and told her to not come back. It had been like a weight was lifted from me, and I never wanted to see her again. Listen, I'm glad you got away, but why Pittsburgh? Specific reason? Pittsburgh has magical properties in the water that make all of your troubles go away. I live here, and I know. There's no problems at all. None. Stop looking at me like that. Everything is fine. The weather is perfect. The roads are great. Everyone gets along perfectly fine, I swear. It's great. Everything is wonderful. I moved my ex in way too early. She hated where she was living and I wanted to help her with her mental state, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. She didn't have a job, so I paid for everything. When she finally did get a job, she'd keep all of the money to herself and then quit out of nowhere after a couple of weeks or so. Slowly but surely, she started mistreating me in pretty much every way apart from the stuff in the bedroom, and like a frog boiling in water, I allowed it to happen by justifying it to myself. I even found out about financial abuse being a thing. You know it's a great relationship when it teaches you about a new form of spousal mistreatment. She used her mental issues to manipulate me into buying her so many things, including a frickin' $600 or $700 laptop. As soon as I ran out of money, we started having problems, and 16 grand in credit card debt later, she broke up with me and continued to live in my apartment for another couple of months. She was on a lease, so I couldn't kick her out because legally, the apartment was hers just as much as it was mine. She finally moved out on my birthday, the last December. I'm still picking up the pieces. I dated someone for almost 3 years, starting back in grade 10 in high school. Everything was great for the first year or so, and he treated me well, and we had some things in common. Didn't realize until after we broke up how much of a grade A neckbeard he actually was. Thought for a while that if we stayed together after high school, we could get married because he was my first relationship and I felt like I loved him so much that I'd marry him. Then about a year and a half into the relationship, he started to show his true colors. His family never had much money, so sometimes I'd help him to pay for stuff. He started to yell and scream if I didn't give him money to buy some game or food that he wanted, and many times he'd embarrass me in the middle of public settings like Walmart. My parents sometimes would also help pay his gas, and that got to a point where he'd come to ask my parents for the money because they hadn't given it to him yet. I didn't want to give him money all the time and even tried calling him out on it. But he'd always scream and yell saying, "How dare I tell him not to take my money, blah blah blah." He generally became emotionally and financially controlling. I didn't know financial abuse was a thing until after we broke up, and the incident that made me really stop loving him was the night he committed the unspeakable act on me. He finally decided that waiting for me to be ready wasn't enough, so he took it. We still dated almost a year after that, but I was just there out of fear of what he'd do if I left him. I finally left him the next year, right before my birthday, after finding out that he'd cheated on me with my now ex-best friend. I wish I'd said something sooner to my parents, but I only told them 3 or 4 years after it happened. Now I hope I never see him again. We were in a long-distance relationship for over 3 years and eventually it started to fizzle. She'd tell me to move to the States and drop my college degree, my family, and my animals to live as an illegal immigrant, and that I could just do whatever odd jobs I could just to be with her. I told her I needed to wait. She'd get very upset every time I went out with friends and would bombard my Facebook wall with random crap and send me private messages with passive-aggressive insults and threats of her not being alive anymore. I'd travel up there twice a year whenever I had vacations from uni and spend about 2 months with her, which were always great. She'd just get incredibly possessive and insecure when we were apart because my social life started to blossom down here and she was scared I'd meet someone else. Once I stayed for 6 months until the very last day of my visa. I broke things off with her and moved on, but she kept messaging me asking to be friends. I tried, but she'd randomly blow up at me, insulting me for ruining her life by making her think she could be loved. I told her that she did deserve love, and she'd get even more upset. We just couldn't talk at all. Then she messaged me many years afterwards, telling me that I had a legal obligation to marry her since I said I would 5 years ago, and therefore she expected me to just fly up there and fulfill my obligation. Had to block her. I started dating this girl during my junior year of high school. We dated for about 7 or 8 months when she started becoming a huge flirt. I don't judge, but it's not something I could emotionally handle, so I called it off. I started getting closer to one of my best friends as she was a huge support during the breakup, and eventually I caught the feelings. My ex did not like that. Late one night I saw her flexing her dad's 9mm on her Instagram and in the comments saying, "I'll shoot the both of them." I went to the dean's office at school the next day and she got arrested and spent the night in jail. Actually did end up giving a no-contact order. Yep, that's several orders of magnitude beyond a red flag, isn't it? A red roadblock? Anyway, folks, when you see your exes moving on, surviving and thriving is the best revenge you can get. Public declarations of oncoming vengeance are much further down the list and not really very sensible. I was dating a guy who was very sweet in the beginning. After about 6 months, he got possessive. He didn't trust me. An example of this was one night I told him I was meeting a friend I used to work with at a bar about a block away. We lived in a safe area and it was a short walk. Her name sounded like it could be male or female, but I assured him she was a she. He showed up at the bar while we were there and it made him look very insecure. He began tracking my phone's GPS. I found out when I stopped at a relative's house after work on my way home and he freaked out and called my mum. She actually knew that was where I was, and he had a very hard time believing I wasn't cheating. The last straw was my first week at a new job. I worked nights and had my phone. I got this long-winded email regarding an innocent comment on a Facebook selfie of me. There were screenshots of it and a huge manifesto about why my buddies online all wanted to take me away from him. After I broke up with him, I got emails for months swinging between apologies and telling me I was awful. I also got a variety of emails from fake addresses, all concerning him. It was insane. Started dating in high school, had some ups and downs, but at the time I just chalked it up to us being immature. My last 2 years of college really proved that he had some serious issues. When I moved out of state for good, it was like a switch flipped and he got extremely possessive and controlling. He wanted all of my friends' numbers, gave me a schedule of when we need to be in communication, and if I missed any of it, he was blowing up my phone with threats of self-deletion. Finally got the restraining order when he showed up to my friend's apartment looking for me, threatening to call the police because I still had a pair of his shoes, which I didn't even have. I found out that he was attempting to solicit minors. Like a record scratch, it was over. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is about my sister. She and her ex dated on and off in high school. At some point in the 8th grade, he admitted he was in love with her, and she admitted she had feelings for him too, so they started dating in the 10th grade. I told her something was off about him. I'm not necessarily an intuitive person. I try my hardest not to judge a situation too quickly, but something about this guy just rubbed me the wrong way. They dated for about 6 months, and he began showing signs of a behavior that really set the alarm bells ringing. Like others have stated, he began calling her and keeping tabs on her. He demanded to know when she made it home and when she went to sleep. He demanded that she edit her social media, MySpace at the time, to include pictures of them and only them so everyone knew that they were together. She visited me in hospital. I had severe stomach flu. Something wasn't right and she told me she wanted to break up with him. She told me she was a bit scared of the guy. He was big, maybe 6'4" and about 230 pounds. My mum begged her to end it with him and she did. The calls kept pouring in for about 2 weeks and she did her best to avoid him. Once I was back in school, I happened to catch an encounter between the two of them. He had her pinned against her locker, telling her she wasn't leaving until they talked things out. I told him to back off and he threatened me, and then she threatened him. He stormed off, punched a locker, broke 2 of his fingers, and then dropped it for a little while. He popped up a few years later on the morning of my sister's wedding with a love letter. We're not sure how he knew she was getting married. We'd all had him blocked on social media. The letter was mailed to our home, which she no longer lived in. He hasn't come around anymore, but honestly, I would not put it past him. My sister's husband is an avid hunter, so that might be what's keeping him away. I'll throw my hat into the ring here. I dated a girl years ago. She was essentially everything I thought I wanted in a girl. She was cute, funny, liked just enough things I liked for us to have common interests, but just different enough to show each other new things and experiences. I was heavy into her and she was heavy into me. Then things got weird. She started getting jealous of high school friends I'd known way before her, and even went as far as telling me I wasn't allowed to hang out with some of my female friends, except for the few she thought were uglier than her. And things got worse. She started getting jealous of inanimate objects like my game consoles and video games, some of which she gave me. It came to a head when my grandmother asked me to watch her dog. It was a tiny little hand dog that I adored, and one day I was half asleep and saw her literally kick this tiny dog off my bed with her feet. I asked her what the hell her problem was, and she told me that she doesn't like that I give the dog more attention than her. Things got even worse. She'd physically bully me in little ways when I did things she didn't like, such as bending my fingers or hitting me in the face, stuff like that. Eventually, everything I did she didn't like. After a while, I got the courage to dump her, and she tried to tell me she was pregnant to keep me, which was an obvious lie. After that, I discovered she'd still stalk my Facebook page and told some of her friends and our mutual friends that I was mistreating her. I also learned that when I was away, she'd let dudes feel her up and other stuff too. Luckily, I've landed a great girl that cares about me and isn't a jealous psycho like my ex was. Yeah, this is pretty dangerous. This sort of person seems to happen across both genders, and I suppose you can just be thankful that she was presumably limited in how far she could go with the physical violence, although I might just be assuming that she was smaller. You really can't win. You can either get an awful guy who's more likely to have a physical advantage, or someone who can fake a pregnancy and claim you forced them to do things. Lose-lose. Just run when bad people of either gender show their true colors, I guess. I was dating a guy. I really liked him. He was smart, funny, adventurous. We were getting pretty serious. He pretty much lived at my house. One weekend I went home for my dad's birthday. All of my brothers were home. I have 5 of them. We ate, drank, and were merry. One of my sister-in-laws took some pictures and posted them on Facebook with me tagged in them. Got back to my house Sunday evening and my boyfriend was coming over shortly to hang out and spend the night. When he got there, he was basically frothing at the mouth. He shoved me and called me a working girl. Started pushing me around, ranting about how he had to see me making seductive poses all over the internet and hanging out with a bunch of guys. I told him they were my brothers, but at that point, I was already done with him. I told him to get the F out of my house. He took that as an invitation to throw me up against a wall and try to force me to kiss him. My roomie heard the commotion and came out of her room with a baseball bat. That moron made the only good decision he had made that day and decided to leave. Kicked in a pantry door and wrecked some drywall on his way out. I threw all of his stuff in a dumpster. He ended up stalking me for years, showing up drunk at places I'd moved to after we'd dated, calling after I'd changed my number, even texted me on the week of my wedding to ask me to reconsider marrying him instead. Yeah, you crazy F, I want to dump the love of my life for a crazy stalker. We were spending a large amount of time together, with me staying at his house several nights of the week. He went mad one day because he said we weren't spending enough time together. He pulled out a notepad and drew up a schedule outlining in excruciating detail each hour that I'd spend with him throughout the week from then on. I distinctly remember sitting there, saying nothing and feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone. Things got significantly crazier from then on, but that moment always stuck out in my mind. The worst version I have of this was a guy who I'd been dating who rammed my truck with a moving van repeatedly at an immigration checkpoint in New Mexico well after dark. He thought it was funny. He had been behaving badly, but I thought it was just the stress of the move. The aggravated attack by U-Haul is when I decided to break up with him. He stalked me for years after that, pestering me at work, which led to me getting fired. I switched from law firm to legal software, and that seemed to make it harder to find me. His stalking ended with him blowing up a brick-and-mortar mailbox with plastic explosives. I think he laid low after that because the FBI were after him. He eventually moved back to California years later. An ex-girlfriend of his contacted me about 7 years later when she was settling his estate. She wanted to make sure there weren't any children. Started dating not long after a previous relationship. At first, everything was amazing and I did everything for this girl. For my 21st birthday, we went to Alton Towers with 2 of my friends, one boy and one girl. We stayed over at the hotel. We were all in the same room having a drink and a laugh when suddenly my girlfriend stormed out of her room for no reason. Rightly so, I follow her back to our room to ask what's up. Before I could even finish my sentence, she punched me square in the face, gets me to the floor, and then kicks me about 5 or 6 times. I ask why, and it's because I'm apparently always looking at my friend, the female one. Anyway, in the morning we set off home and I assumed all was well. We drop my friends off, and as I pull up to her house, she puts her feet on my windscreen and kicks it 3 or 4 times, cracking it. Not sure why I stayed with her for a month after this, as she scratched my face repeatedly when I accepted an old school friend on Facebook. I started dating this amazing girl, but she was just getting out of a very traumatic marriage, and I was her first female partner. She started showing up at my work with flowers and coffee, which was sweet, but I'd never told her where my office was. Then she started showing up at my house at all hours and would get upset when I needed to sleep. I worked graveyard shifts. She then wanted me to meet her daughters, which I wasn't comfortable with because we were in the first stages of a relationship. I decided to break it off. She was just too needy, which was understandable coming from someone who'd just left an awful relationship and discovered their sexuality, but I wasn't the person that could guide her. She decided that I was just afraid of love and started leaving books of poetry on my porch and leaving long letters in my mailbox. I finally had to call law enforcement after I came home to her in my bed. She had taken a ladder to my second-story room window, I lived with roommates, and she had broken in. I found her undressed in my bed, covered in blood from several intentional incisions. She proceeded to tell me that I was the only thing keeping her alive. I cut off all contact, but I truly hope that she's gotten some help and is doing well. She was a wonderful woman, but so broken. It's good of you to be able to see her qualities. A lot of us would have had a very hard time seeing the positives in someone after finding them bleeding out in our bed, and possibly thinking that they'd passed away there. That's a super scary image. I hope she got the help she needed. My relationship with my ex in uni seemed really great. He loved me a lot and was super attentive. I even went on holiday with his family at some point, and I thought we'd marry eventually and start a family. Long story short, when I got busy with school, the final year, and didn't see him as often, he started getting clingy and jealous of everyone, including my female friends. I tried to break up with him probably 3 times before he accepted it. I explained how I wanted to focus on my studies, and the situation wasn't good for either of us. The last time he seemed to understand my point, and we remained friends. This also didn't last long, and he eventually started stalking me online and in person, and constantly bothering my friends. He managed to go to my senior year party, even though he wasn't in my year. Eventually, he texted me calling me a skank and that I'd cheated on him, all the usual accusations. He told this to all of our mutual friends in uni, so that was fun. He acted like a total lunatic, begging for me to reconsider a friendship after that, but obviously there was no chance of that. The last straw was him showing up at the graduation ceremony, making it awkward for me and all of my family. She punched me in the face while I was sleeping. Apparently, my phone had woken her up when I received a text in the middle of the night from a girl asking if there was any chance I could come pick her up. My girlfriend assumed I was cheating and figured that the most efficient way of addressing her concerns was just to punch me in the face, hard, while I lay there sleeping. The text was from a non-Alabamian cousin who had some sort of semi-emergency and needed to get picked up from a party. He pushed a little girl in a store because she tried to pet his emotional support dog. Instead of just picking up the dog, he laid hands on a little girl. There's a lot more to that, but that one sticks out the most. I recently found out he was arrested again. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.